Data secret.
Good evening, Portsmouth. I await a motion to leave, exit the non-public, and to seal the minutes of the non-public session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And Kelly, when you are ready, can we please call the roll?
Mayor McEachran,
Here.
Assistant Mayor Kelly,
Here.
Counselor Tabor,
Here.
Counselor Denton,
Here.
Counselor Moreau,
Here.
Counselor Bagley,
Here.
Counselor Lombardi,
Here.
Counselor Blaylock,
Here.
Counselor Cook.
Here.
Just want to stand and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before I read the proclamation, I just want to make sure that if she's tuning in tonight, Liz Connors, we hope you're doing well. I know that you had a little bit of an injury, and we're all pulling for a fast and speedy recovery here in Portsmouth. Very much appreciate all the work that you've done over the years, and we expect you back on your feet dancing soon. With that, proclamation. In celebration of Juneteenth 2023, whereas President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation declared that as January 1st, 1863, all those enslaved in the states in rebellion against the Union shall be thenceforth and forever free. But it was not until June 19th, 1865, for that proclamation to take effect in Galveston, Texas, when Major General Gordon Granger of the United States Army gave the order declaring the enslaved to be free. And whereas 20 years ago, in October 2003, the accidental unearthing of an African burial ground that had been built over, and forgotten beneath a city street began the ongoing efforts by this community to reckon with our history of enslavement, to recognize the presence of Africans in the region before enslavement, and to create the African Burial Ground Memorial Park. And whereas 10 years ago, in 2013, New Hampshire State Senator Martha Fuller Clark sponsored the legislation for New Hampshire to declare Juneteenth as a holiday and brought the bill forward again in 2017 so our representatives could continue to push for state recognition of Juneteenth, a federal holiday since 2021. And whereas the Black Heritage Trail of New Hampshire has extended its annual Juneteenth celebration this year to a week-long series of events to honor these early African settlers, their descendants, the Africans who survived the Middle Passage, and their successive generations who have contributed to the development, wealth, and well-being of New England. And whereas in Portsmouth, especially in our 400th year, we recognize Juneteenth to remember a critical part of American history and pay tribute to the achievements and deeply rooted culture of the Black community in our city, and rededicate ourselves to commitment to being a racial justice municipality. Now, therefore, I, Declan McEachran, Mayor of the City of Portsmouth, on behalf of the members of the City Council and citizens of Portsmouth, do hereby proclaim Juneteenth 2023 in Portsmouth, and urge all members of the community to learn more about the Emancipation Proclamation and the history behind the holiday, and to join in celebrations, commemorations, and other programs and tributes organized by community members, including the Black Heritage Trail of New Hampshire, the Seacoast African American Cultural Center, Black Lives Matter Seacoast, the Seacoast NAACP, the Racial Unity Team, the Business Association for People of Color, and so many others. Given with my hand in the seal of the City of Portsmouth on this 5th day of June, 2023. And I believe that I have with us Nora Lewis and Barbara Ward to accept the proclamation. Would you please join us up here on the dais for a picture as well? Or we can do the picture down here. The lighting's terrible. Why don't we go stand up so the whole council can be in this picture? I wouldn't mind standing.
All of us.
You guys just stand and join us here. It's always weird when I don't know if the lighting's any better here.
Get in front of all these chairs. No, are you right here? Yeah.
If you'd like to say any words, please feel free to do so. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, I think you said a lot, so.
I've yet to meet a short proclamation. Next up, the acceptance of minutes. I'd wait a motion to approve the May 8th, 2023 and May 15th, 2023 City Council meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We next have the public comment, and for those that didn't sign up on this but would like to speak to the budget, we do have that public hearing extended on the budget where your time is unlimited. But if you want to speak, please do so here, but you have to recognize the 3 minutes. First up, Rich Duddy on the Rec Department budget.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, Rich Duddy, 56 Sweat Avenue, Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I'd like to speak in favor of the Portsmouth Rec budget. I know it's rather odd because I'm on the committee, so I should speak in favor of it. My family first started using the Portsmouth Rec in 1986. One of the things that I always impressed with my wife was how the rec put together such a program with such a small budget. Continues to amaze me every year, year in and year out, the programs they put together, the things they put together, not only for just the youth, but for the senior center, things like that. I mean, if you look at the last couple of years, you have the senior center, the turf fields, community campus, tremendous, tremendous department for this city. And I just urge you to please support them in their bid. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rich. Next, Roy Helsel on budget publication.
Good evening, Roy Helsel, 777 Middle Road, Unit 22. The publication they have down at the library is not comprehensive for an average citizen. They let you check it out for a week. It takes you longer to go through it and understand it. There should be some standardization to it at least. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. And next up, Peter Officer on the topic of Sherburne.
Hey guys, Peter Officer, Colonial Drive. Here tonight to speak once again in regards to the potential development of the Sherburne School property. I've been following this issue closely since the neighborhood meeting that took place at the Sherburne School back in January. The same meeting where the mayor and Craig Welch of the PHA presented their proposal and plan for the city to donate or give away land to the PHA, a private developer, to develop the girls' softball field that exists on the property. At that meeting, the mayor had promised transparency and to provide answers to all the questions that were asked by the public that night, and that the answers would be made available on the city website. Yet another empty promise from the mayor. One of the many questions asked by the public was why the mayor acted in a collusive manner, making the direct ask of the PHA to develop that property as if the property was the mayor's to give away. Following the pushback from the community in response to the mayor's ask of the PHA to develop the girls' field, the council voted to send this matter to the Land Use Committee to research and provide a report of city-owned parcels for potential reuse as workforce housing, knowing full well the Land Use Committee lacks the funding, knowledge, and expertise to effectively examine these lots of land. And the committee, which has 3 council members and Craig Welch of the PHA, would obviously promote Sherburne as the only option. Again, more collusion. Which is why I'm glad they chose to tap Mr. Cracknell, the principal planner. Mr. Cracknell stated on the May 5th Land Use Committee meeting that, quote, rather than a detailed assessment and evaluation of engineering or geotechnical information, the report represents preliminary staff findings after map review and a site visit, meaning these properties still need to be examined by professionals, not elected officials. Furthermore, this week, Planning Board Chair Rick Shellman pointed out what many of us have been saying from the start. Mr. Shellman was quoted today in Seacoast Online stating, "I do have a legal concern with the city selecting what is essentially a private developer to develop city property. I've got a constitutional problem with that. That's public assets for private gain," end quote. Lastly, I want to say that I'm still very troubled by the actions of the council members that sit on the Land Use Committee, especially Ms. Moreau. Having virtually attended each Land Use Committee meeting that has taken place this year, Ms. Moreau has repeatedly misled the public and spoken over other committee members and members of the public who push back or ask questions. Additionally, Ms. Moreau had seemingly intentionally left out the Greenleaf property on her initial, quote, report, end quote, which was nothing more than an Excel spreadsheet listing properties with no other relevant data, yet again showing her and the committee's incompetence. Only to have members of the public continue to mention multiple times the blaringly obvious exclusion of the Greenleaf, aka the old skate park property. How could such a large plot of land get overlooked? Moreau continuously tried to brush off the viability of that property, quoting, quote, deed restrictions. But could it be Ms. Moreau simply doesn't want a development there since her business that she owns is on the Greenleaf and directly abuts that property? I'm sure Ms. Moreau will state that they were all in agreement Sherburne was the #1 pick, but I will encourage you to watch the tape. Council was all in agreement. Every non-council person was not. What I'm getting at is that this council has acted in secret, behind closed doors, and is engaging in outright collusion to write a blank check to a private developer and give away public land to a private entity for personal gain and a bullet point on a political resume.
Thank you, Peter. Next up, Jim Lee on the topic of First Amendment.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, City Council, Jim Lee, Portsmouth. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today about a fundamental aspect of our democracy, the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. This crucial provision not only guarantees our freedom of speech, but it also serves as a cornerstone of our civil liberties, allowing us to express ourselves and engage in open dialogue without fear of censorship. However, it is important to understand that the First Amendment does not confer the right to be shielded from offense or discomfort caused by speech, photos, or the written word. First, let's appreciate the significance of the First Amendment. It was established by our founding fathers as a safeguard against tyranny and a mechanism for fostering an informed and engaged citizenry. This amendment empowers us to openly discuss our beliefs, criticize the government, and advocate for change. It allows us to challenge the status quo and promote social progress. Again, however, the First Amendment is not a shield from discomfort or offense that certain speech, photos, or written words may cause. We live in a diverse society with a wide variety of perspectives, beliefs, and values. It is through the clash of these ideas that progress is made. We should encourage a robust and respectful debate, even if it challenges our own beliefs. By engaging in dialogue and grappling with different viewpoints, we expand our understanding and foster a stronger and more inclusive society. In a democratic society, the responsibility to challenge and counter offensive speech lies not with censorship or silencing, but with education, empathy, and promoting alternate perspectives. By engaging in open and respectful dialogue, we can address ignorance, combat bigotry, and foster a more tolerant and inclusive society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. Next up, Sue Polidora, clarification.
Sue Polidora, Middle Street. And first, before I go into the clarification, I just want to say that the city needs to consider doing a zero-based budgeting. Right now, your budget is way too cumbersome, too big, impossible to follow unless you're trained in accounting. So zero-based at least will allow you to go and look at a budget cleanly without all of these other things that have been added through the years. So I encourage you to do that. My clarification is regarding the reading that I have held for the last 4 years on the Declaration of Independence. Of course, I have to do it on the day that we celebrate the Declaration of Independence on the 4th. And of course, I have to do it in the place where it was originally done, which was the State House. That building was right across from the North Church, is gone. So the North Church is the only property that I would consider to have a very realistic, close to the historical purpose, a historical data that we have. I heard some of the counselors talk about this last week, and I just wanted to clarify the reason why I have it there and why I have it around that time is because we had the kids from the Piscataqua Ranger Fife and Drum Club. They already attend an event in Portsmouth on the 4th of July in the morning. So if I have it later during the day, they will have too much idle time. And these are young kids driven by the parents. So I was asked if I could move it closer to the time, maybe an hour after they get done to their with their other event. This is why I have it at 11 o'clock. Not to be in conflict with the naturalization ceremony. I would like to attend, but I can't be in both places at the same time. And the thing is that we have a mandate to celebrate the 4th by remembering those things that made the independence happen. So we've been doing it for 240 odd years before the naturalization ceremony, Counselor. That's why I do it that day. We have precedents. So anyways, just wanted to issue that clarification. It's not because I want to create any kind of issue. I usually just clear it through the office of the city manager. This year, for some reason, ended up the city council. This is going to be the 5th year I do it. And it's just a simple ceremony. People from the community read the Declaration of Independence, and the kids play music. That's about all it is. So anyways,
Sue.
just wanted to let you know.
Look forward to it.
Thank you.
Next up, Sue Sterry on historic cemeteries.
Mr. Mayor and City Council, I just want to give you a brief update of what we've been up to the last 3 months. On May 27th of Memorial Weekend, the Cemetery Committee's 400th celebration project was completed. 400 headstones cleaned in 4 weekends. With the help from 32 community volunteers, we cleaned the 400 headstones in Cotton Cemetery, plus 35 headstones in adjoining Elmwood. With much appreciation, a big thank you goes to Corin Hallowell and his staff, Tom, Fiona, Ryan, and Franny. They manned the city water truck each Saturday morning and assisted in cleaning the headstones. Since last May, we have completed headstone cleanings at Point of Graves, Pleasant Street Cemetery, Cotton, Elmwood, and 3/4 of North Cemetery. We are optimistic that by October we can clean the remaining stones in North and the entire of Union Cemetery, which has many obelisks. I had the privilege to participate in the city's cleaning, Keeping History Above Water 3-day national conference. On May 9th, I spoke to about 50 people from across the country. The talk emphasized how hard it can be for a community to financially and emotionally commit to saving its cemeteries from succumbing to sea level rise. The presentation was held at Point of Graves, which is one of our historic cemeteries, which has the potential to be impacted by sea level rise in the future. Lastly, from a conference attendee, I learned that Hall Cemetery, Pleasant Street Cemetery, and Point of Graves are already on the National Register. I verified the fact, and the committee will be researching plaques for each of these cemeteries. So that means 5 of our cemeteries are already on Historic Register, which is a big deal. The Cemetery Committee would like to thank the City Council for its continuing support to restore Portsmouth's historic cemeteries. Thank you.
Great job, Sue, and to the whole cemetery committee. Thank you. Next up, Esther Kennedy on the topic of the Land Use Committee.
Good evening, Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave, Portsmouth. I'm here tonight, and actually the first speaker did an amazing job on really stating the concerns. But I was at the meeting briefly because I got called away because of work. And I'm a little disappointed that public comment did not take place before the committee made a decision. I'm a little disappointed that Mr. Welch, who is the benefactor of that decision, was allowed to stay at the table and didn't recuse himself for the discussion. I'm a little disappointed that our planning board chair, who we know has a lot of information, a lot of street cred on understanding these concepts, I think made very point discussion points that were kind of belittled. So I guess if we're truly going to be inclusive, and if we're truly going to give our land away as a city, then I would hope we would have more opportunities for people to speak, give their opinion, give their thoughts, especially those people out at Panaway Manor who have to live with the decision. And I have to ask, why was Mr. Welch there? They're going to be over $2,000 probably for those apartments. That's a lot of money. If we truly were going to support our community, then I would think we would be looking at doing low-income housing in the Greenleaf Skateboard Park area and support people that we might be looking for a rental of around $1,200 for people. And then you're actually dealing with the wait people downtown, the people that are servicing our cars, the people that are working in our companies that are working in secretarial areas, the people that are working in our custodial staff. But the rates that you're trying to go for, those people can't afford either. So I guess I'm really disappointed, and I'm hoping this council in your discussions tonight can ask the Land Use Committee to maybe go back and listen to the public before you make your choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Next up, Peter Huda on the topic of Sherburne process, question mark.
Good evening, Peter Huda, 280 South Street. So I was really surprised today when I went online and I heard that Portsmouth picked the #1 site for workforce housing. I think it's a little premature. Put it in the paper. I was at the meetings, I was at most of the meetings, and I did not see it the same way. So how did we get here? Let's review the process. How did we get to the process of selecting Oni Sherburne? After what was a total horrid presentation at the Lister to the residents of Panaway Manor, it was decided that we would go and look at all the public properties available. The Land Use Committee pulled a report of 200 properties, they said. Included in those properties, which I have the list here, were wetlands, parks, schools, parking lots, cemeteries, Granite Street. Oh, we even had a median in here. So we narrowed it down to a number of properties, and then it was decided that the city staff would go out and look and select the properties that were going to be included. Only the city staff, 2 city staff members. That was brought back to the Land Use Committee. It seems that we have a bit of a conflict of interest with one of the members sitting on the Land Use Committee. Now, in my mind, somebody sitting on the Land Use Committee who is, or has been, it seems to the public, the only one that was selected as a developer to move forward here would have a conflict of interest voting for himself. That doesn't seem to be a problem. Councilor Cook, do you think that's a problem for the Governance Committee, since you're discussing this topic currently? I would ask. Next, the statement that needs to be made here before any property, and I urge the mayor to look at this, the PHA is not part of the city of Portsmouth. They are a private developer. And I would ask you to think about the question that could come up after this. So, does every private developer have the right to expect the same from the city council? Can every developer come and sit on your committees and select themselves? Definitely something to think about and what you're doing here. So before I finish here, I'm going to ask you, does what the planning board or the planning director have anything to do with it, with what was said? As the planning chair was ignored, and so was the other committee members' suggestions at this meeting before this was brought forward to you. This is very disturbing to the public, and it borders on corruption. Thank you.
Petra. Next up, Lisa Haggerty McMahon on Union Street sewer separation.
Yes, hi, good evening, Mayor McEachern and Council. I am Lisa Haggerty McMahon, and I was born and raised in Portsmouth, and learned that I'm actually Mayor McEachern's neighbor recently. I'm from the West Coast, but nice to meet you. I've been meaning to come by and say hello.
Hey. Nice
So I'm across the street, one with the wheelchair ramp. I moved my dad into this house and during the pandemic to keep him out of a assisted living. There's a couple of things that I've got on the.
Oh,
I guess
you weren't
my-
speaking on the Union Street separation thing.
There are
Oh,
two
you're-
things.
okay.
It's Union
Okay.
Street, but where we are, it's the other 77 Meredith Way.
Okay.
And so I will share with you guys that I apologize. I have not been into this forum before. Like I said, born and raised here, and went to UNH, taught in the public schools before I left for the West Coast when I was at UNH as a substitute teacher. I taught Odyssey of the Mind with the current principal of Mary Lyons. So, yeah, my roots go far and deep. My dad was an engineer for the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard for 41 years. And I've come back to actually help get him settled, and I'm finding, I'm finding that I love a lot of what I see, and I'm also finding that I'm a little disturbed about some of the things that I'm seeing happen to the beautiful old Portsmouth that we know, and that's actually related to these questions I have about these projects, if you will. So the Union Street sewer separation project. I was there today, and I didn't know this meeting was happening tonight. Engineering kindly told me that this was happening, and I said, oh, well, I'll hightail it down here and talk to the council because it might be too late to do anything about this, and I don't know. So the Union Street separation project was, I was informed a long time ago. I got involved in all the meetings early by Zoom from California. And then I tried to do my diligence by talking to DPW the following year. It was on my calendar a year later to get on the phone with them and Zoom and talk to them about what they were going to do to the frontage. And so let me just share with you what 179 Union Street is. It is the historic James Coffin House. And it is not in the historic district, but it is an historic house. And it currently houses 5 tenants for us. My husband and I own this building as well as the one on Thornton Street. And I bought it because of this beautiful preservation of antiquity in Portsmouth. It's got original tubs, it's got original, just everything inside almost is original. And so they're going to destroy the sidewalk, and I know that that's important for the project. However, I know that on State Street, they did not destroy all the brickwork, and they left some of the brickwork in front of the homes along State Street nearby. And so I think what I heard from DPW today was kindly, I understand your concern, Lisa, but, we've got marching orders to chop, chop, chop. We're going to chop it up and chuck your bricks out. And I thought, I got to talk to somebody about not chopping those bricks up and throwing them out. So that's why I'm here, and I don't know where I notice you don't give responses to people here, so I don't know how it works. That's the sewer separation issue I have.
Okay, we don't give responses, but I would ask you, just because the public comment, it's a comment here, work sessions we have, but I'm
Sure.
happy if you send both this and any concerns that you have with your neighbor on 77th Meredith Way.
Yes.
You can email the entire council
Okay.
through the form mail,
Okay.
Or you can email me directly at mayor@cityofportsmouth.com, and we can talk about this.
Just mayor at City of Portsmouth, and maybe
.com.
I'll come by and knock and say hey.
You can also just come to my house, which
I
is
see
right
you with a
across. You
dog
guys
and
had
your
a lot of.
I
lot
met
of
your
cars
mother-in-law. She came by
Yeah.
and chatted with my dad.
Yeah, we were really excited that the ramp went in, and we're sad to see him not on the bike anymore, but that's probably.
You probably met my dad, around on his bike. Yeah,
Yep.
he's doing well. We're getting projects done to keep that wheelchair accessibility. So, thank you. So I'll email, because the Meredith Way thing is I'm worried that we're going to have water intrusion onto our property because of what's happening. That's the crux of it. So thank you. Nice to meet you, Council.
Nice to meet you.
Good night.
All right, next up, we have Paige Trace on the topic of Portsmouth.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Paige Trace, 27 Hancock Street. I don't know where to start. It's one of those evenings. I will save my budget comments for later. I think that the issue of workforce housing and the Portsmouth Housing Authority and the Portsmouth Housing Authority Limited, which has investors, are two separate entities, and I do believe for the life of me that you all can just say no to the development of the Sherborne School. You have choices, and workforce housing is very serious in this community, but the entire process is flawed at this point. You all were elected by that community. You all, with the exception of the city manager and the city attorney, you all took an oath, and Kelly, my apologies. You work for the people who live out there, and you ignore their wishes. You trample on them. You give Mr. Welsh the ability to vote on a project that would benefit his investors, all under the guise of workforce housing. Only $2,000 an apartment isn't necessarily workforce housing. So I say to you, what are you thinking? And then you rudely tell them during a meeting that you have business, your own business, Councilor Moreau. How inappropriate. Not to mention that then the head of the planning board suggests that where is the RFP? If you are going to build workforce housing and you are going to give away your property that belongs to the people you work for, the residents, that property belongs as much to Panaway Manor as it does to any one of you or me. But I have a right to ask you what you were thinking when you have choices. Why isn't the skate park being looked at? Why isn't that property being looked at? And please tell me, where is the RFP that you intend to do that would be constitutionally correct? So I'm just saying, please say no tonight. Just take a deep breath and work for the people who voted you into those seats. Understand how much it means to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Paige. Next up, Francis Cormier on patterns emerging.
Francis Cormier, Melbourne Street. During April and May, the Portsmouth Library, they did a historical series on the Holocaust, according to National Public Television, Ken Burns. It was 6 nights, and I went to all of them except one. And one thing I noticed that patterns were emerging as they went through the history of Hitler's Germany. And I see those same patterns emerging in this country today. And one is the monopolization of the news media. which we see today. That's one of the things Hitler did. Then he monopolized the educational system, all the universities and high schools and everything, and the suppression of free speech. And another thing that wasn't mentioned, no one could own a gun except Hitler and his phony government. So if you wonder how could someone kill 6 million Jews, well, it helps that no one owned a gun except Hitler and his the phony people that followed him. Another pattern I see emerging that was under Hitler's Germany is the fusion of science with politics. And I see that today in this country. One thing Hitler was good at, he would try to turn politics into science. And we see that today. I got old biology books from the 60s. It says there's only two possibilities for you folks, all of you. You're either XX chromosome or you're XY chromosome. That's it. There's only two possibilities in the realm of biology. If you disagree, somehow you're the bad guy. And what Hitler was good at was signifying someone as the bad people. In that case, it was the Jews. Now the bad people are the ones who don't want to go along with the new biology. Here's another thing in the old biology books. They were trying to separate mammals. What separates mammals from reptiles and birds, etc.? Someone said, well, they're warm-blooded. But birds are warm-blooded. And then someone said, oh, it's hair or fur. No, but dolphins are mammals. They don't have fur. The diagnostic attribute of mammals is the secretion of milk. And the secretion of milk is unique only to the female. Today, that's classified as hate speech. I got a biology book from the 1960s. When are they going to come with a search warrant to get the book and burn it? See the patterns emerging. Same patterns Hitler used in Germany. We see them emerging here today. So history repeats itself. Thank you.
Looking to Zoom. No hands raised. Next up, then, I'll await a motion before we go into the public hearing of the budget resolutions. I'd wait a motion to pull up the conversation on the sewer agreement with Newington, given that we have representatives from Newington here tonight. We do, correct? You just raise your hand.
We do.
Yep, thanks.
So moved, Your Honor.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. And that is, under the city manager's name, number one, city manager's actions require action, Town of Newcastle sewer agreement.
Happy to provide an introduction and mention that Deputy City Manager Suzanne Woodland is here. She spearheaded the effort with the town, and she can answer any questions. But you'll recall that at the May 15th meeting, we brought this forward. There were questions that needed to be answered. Suzanne has worked with the Town of Newcastle to add additional language to the proposed agreement to reflect the concerns raised by the council. And as such, the agreement before you tonight has changes that have been discussed and approved by the town. So Suzanne and the town folks are here if anyone has questions.
Any questions from the council? Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. I do want to take this moment to thank Suzanne, the city manager, and Director Brian Getz for spending quite a bit of time on me, because I did have a number of concerns with this document. However, after our discussions, I think we're making the best of a not great situation. We don't really want to take on the pipe management of Newcastle because there's a number of issues there. So we want an agreement where we just process the sewage, so to speak, because as we all know, when sewage goes into the Great Bay, it doesn't care which town or community it's affecting. So I just wanted to acknowledge all the time that they spent with me.
Hey, Councilor Bagley. Councilor Tabor.
Yeah, question for our staff, or perhaps for Newcastle too.
I was struck by the length of this agreement of 20 years. My question is this long an agreement necessary because Newcastle has to bond for some pipe improvements they need to do? Or is
That
there
would
any
be-
other compelling reason that we have to bind the city this long?
There was no compelling reason from Portsmouth's perspective, other than we have generally found that it takes a while to get these agreements drafted because they take staff time, and that's why we have a provision where it automatically adjusts every budget cycle in terms of the rate. So we tried to set it up so we'd get some efficiencies, and we do expect that, and the town can speak for itself, that they would benefit from having some assurance that they can make the investments, but I'd be happy to let them respond to that. So there's no magic number with the 20 from my perspective for the city of Portsmouth.
Okay. And there are termination rights. I think that's important. to point out.
That is correct. There are termination rights in there, and there are a lot of obligations in terms of maintaining the system and making sure that the wastewater we receive is not of a volume more or in excess, and has certain qualities that are not ruinous to our system, so protective of our system. So it does have some additional provisions that we don't have now in place to govern the relationship.
Thank you.
Councilor Moreau.
A question. Can you give us some confirmation around the gallons per day and the gallons maximum average and peak flow rates? There's no sort of, I don't see anything in here that if that, changed or it was more than that. I saw things for new things coming online, but what if that, what happens if they go outside those parameters?
So first off, I worked with first Terry Damaris, city engineer Terry Damaris, and then later confirmed those with our new city engineer, and we're very comfortable that the plant can handle that level of flows. Frankly, given the lack of build-out potential in Newcastle, subject to them really changing their zoning or something, we're not anticipating, frankly, a lot of growth, but there's room in there. So we did talk about those and make sure we were comfortable, and it's also when we designed the Pierce Island plant, we did assume that we would continue to provide for the Newcastle flows.
So there's no definite,
we do have.
They won't reach these numbers, is what you're trying to say.
They are unlikely to reach those numbers, but we are flow metering them, and there are provisions that if for some reason something changes, then there is the ability to exercise the rights that we have under the agreement.
Thanks.
System Mayor.
Thank you. This may be for you, it may be for the representatives. Listed in the agreement, there talks about the 2015 study that showed some major deficiencies in some repairs that have happened and some repairs that are going. So I guess I would some information on if they've developed a master plan for those repairs and what does that look like timeline-wise, and how we will be informed in monitoring that.
Would you like to talk about the additional work you have going forward?
Good evening. Norman Houle, Chairman of the Water and Sewer Commission in Newcastle. The study that was conducted back in 2015, 2016, yes, was very comprehensive. The reality is that the town did not have roughly $1.5–2 million to be able to take on all of these projects. And so in essence, what has happened is that we're kind of just working our way through it, working through some of the deficiencies. The first one being that we replaced all of the sewer pumps back in the 2017, 2018 timeframe. We ended up installing bypass plumbing in the event that you end up having a catastrophic failure. At any pump station, you could bring in temporary pumps. We are right now, as we speak, we just began the electrical systems upgrade project. That began in March. That's going to replace all 3 emergency generators as well as ancillary electric components. And in essence, it's kind of chopping away, if you will, at that list. Do I expect that there are going to be other issues coming up? No. I can't identify for you exactly what may end up happening 1 or 2 years downstream. What we do have right now, as we speak, we have submitted a pre-application to NHDES to try to remediate manholes to cover inflow and infiltration issues. we have a problem. The city of Portsmouth has the same sort of problem. And so we're looking to see if we can't get funds from DES to take care of those. I guess the point that I would make is we're working at it, and we're trying to make improvements, and that, in sum, is where we are.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Cook?
Thank you,
Bagley.
Your Honor. I actually wanted just to say thank you for the work that was done here. The additional language on DES and EPA compliance really was what I was looking for. And so I really appreciate that, especially the clause that says that the sewer rate has to stay at least Portsmouth or higher in order to retain investment in their system. So thank you for the process and for going through this and answering our questions and adding the language that we were looking for.
Councillor Bagley.
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. And I guess maybe I would want to take the temperature of the council to Councillor Tabor's point. 20 years is a pretty long time. Is it feasible or even possible, or is there any appetite for potentially doing this in, with like a 10-year check-in? I mean, it's very difficult to plan the CIP 1 or 2 years out. Trying to plan, most of what we have to do for sewer is handed down either at the federal or state level. And I don't know if there's a way, or if it's too late in the game, to add a clause that there's some sort of 10-year check-in on a status report or something of that nature.
I don't know. Maybe Newcastle would like to speak to the importance of the 20 years. I would also just like to ask, when was the last time we had an agreement in there? Because I think it's been a little longer, and it takes a little while to do these things. But
Thank you. Dave McGuckin, 141 Cranfield Street in Newcastle, Mayor, council members. 2008 was when the last agreement expired. What was the question? I'm sorry.
If there was an appetite, or maybe explain the importance of a 20-year time period for this from Newcastle's perspective.
Yeah, there's language in the contract that I can't say guarantees, but we have agreed that once a year, the city of Portsmouth and the town of Newcastle will sit down and discuss water and sewer things. Anything that involves the city of Portsmouth with our infrastructure, we're going to discuss at least once a year. So I think the 20 years is a reasonable number. But if something happens 5, 6, 7 years from now, we'll know about it never more than when a year goes by. We're not signing a 20-year agreement tonight or whenever you sign it and not seeing you again for 20 years. We're going to see you once a year at least. Once, you being the Suzanne and her crew. If that answers your question.
It might not, Councillor Bagley's, but it answers, at least, we might have to have Suzanne speak to the out provisions that this agreement has. And again, the fact that we have operated for 15 years without an agreement speaks to maybe these things are difficult to nail down, both from our side as well as Newcastle's side. I don't think it was necessarily easy to reach this agreement, but Suzanne, maybe speak to some of the maybe concerns that Councillor Bagley will have to this.
Sure. First off, I am absolutely sure that we will have contact more than once a year. So we did actually put an express provision in here to make it clear that because we would expect that there will be regular rate adjustments, unlike in the old agreements, you sometimes had a fixed number and then you got stuck at that number. One of the things we really wanted to do here is make sure that the City Council had an opportunity, with the good advice of our rate consultant. You're familiar with, Mr. Hyder's work, who is our rate consultant for our water and sewer, and is very familiar with our, all the numbers and our projects, et cetera. So we worked with him for over a year, actually, working with the town. They had a different view on what that number should be. And then working with our rate consultant over that year, kind of came to an agreement of where we thought that number should be, kind of teasing out what was a true wholesale rate, given the particular arrangement that we have with Newcastle, which is different, frankly, than our regular customers and some of the other customers that we serve outside of our municipal boundaries. So the fact that it took us over a year of conversation to actually get to this point kind of looks as to why we generally look for longer term agreements. And it does help from a planning point of view. I'm sure, part of this is also triggered by the regulators are looking for a little more tidiness in our legal documents and in our relationships. And so, when they go to apply to NHDES to get grants or loans at the favorable rates that we're used to here, certainly having a longer term agreement is likely to help them in that process of qualifying and showing their investment in their long-term relationship on how their wastewater is going to be treated. So 20 years was perfectly logical in my mind, but there's no magic number there.
Suzanne, maybe a simple question to get to Councilor Bagley's point. If our rates change through action by the EPA or New Hampshire DES, will we have the ability to change the rates with regard to the Newcastle rate?
The wholesale rate is subject to City Council approval.
Okay.
Just as with your other rates. And we would expect David Hyder come and speak to you each year about how rates get adjusted across the board.
And the fact that Newcastle would agree to that provision understands that we look at this enterprise fund in a scientific model to make sure that the benefit to all residents is equally met when it comes to aligning that sewer rate.
That is correct, and that's why there is the adjustment. It's very clear that this is a rate that is going to change.
Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. This is an unusual question, but if we pursue a stormwater utility, and since we're doing stormwater separation now, and that does reduce flow, likely in the long run from Portsmouth to the Pierce Island treatment plant, at what point do we then ask Newcastle to come on board and also explore a different rate structure around stormwater separation? Because if they're not doing the same separation plan, their flow won't change.
So Newcastle is not a combined system. So the projects that they're doing are different in part than some of the projects that we do. So City of Portsmouth still has part of its city that has stormwater and wastewater flowing into the same pipes, and those are the ones that we are looking to separate over time in order to reduce our combined sewer overflows under the requirements of the Clean Water Act. Now, what they were talking about is this infiltration, inflow and infiltration that comes in when you have basically leaky old pipes, which they have and we have, given the ages of the system. And so both the municipality and the town, within their respective jurisdictions, are working their way to, as you know, because you've seen the CIP, we work and replace our pipes, and they're looking to do that as well. So we're not anticipating big changes in flow on their part. And certainly, yes, we are removing flows from the Portsmouth system. There is a piece that's going down because the stormwater is coming out. We do, of course, we are adding, residential units in particular. But, we factored some of that in, and what we are looking for is greater cooperation, as you know, through the MAM and other arrangements with our neighboring jurisdictions, for part of water quality benefits. And we certainly see them making the continuing investments so they don't have sewer overflows and other issues that benefits all of us. But
Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I guess this is probably a question for Suzanne. Is it even feasible that we'd have a 10-year check-in where, unless, I guess, there's an off-ramp if one party was to be found in breach that's, say, less serious than the year-to-year breach? Or is that not even a thing that we could craft?
We have a fairly good notice of default and breach provision already in there with a pretty short turnaround of 60 days. So if, they were to come out of compliance with some element of this, I think it's 60 days without flipping through my paperwork, but it's fairly short unless there's, a reason why they couldn't reasonably meet that time. So we do already have that built in if there's some failure to pay the bills, when they come due, or they're not meeting, some rule or regulation, or they're putting, some kind of waste in the system that's not permissible.
Councilor Tabor.
Yes, for the deputy city manager. When I was at the newspaper, we had a closed-loop water system for the press, and it backed up at one point, and some alkaline substance got into the sewer system, set off an alarm, and we got a call, and they said, we were getting alkaline, we think it might be you, we'd like to do a dye test. And they did the dye test, we found the problem, we remedied it very quickly. But I just wondered if we have something in the flow from Newcastle that's hazardous like that, do we have the right to go in and do dye tests or do point searches for pollutants?
So interestingly, so yes, we do have some ability within this current agreement. We would probably start with the town of Newcastle and say, we have identified an issue. It is your responsibility to go track this down. Now, practically speaking, do I expect closely working together with the town to figure out where this is coming from? And I would say yes. And I can say that with some confidence, at least right now, because as we were kind of teeing this agreement up, we were checking flow meters. So we have new flow meters, and we were going to measure at a different point than we've historically measured, and the numbers weren't matching up. We had different readings, like substantially different. And both teams, on the Newcastle side and on the city side, went out together, measured together, looked at the data, did their digging, got to a point that we figured it out, sorted it out. Everyone, as of today, is happy with what the meters are showing, and we figured out what the issue was. And so we actually have a very recent, the two communities work well, at least have historically worked well together. And I will say this, it was, part of the, conversation where the Newcastle was talking about this plan that they have where they've identified deficiencies. Part of that is the city of Portsmouth was out with representatives of Newcastle initially to say, you might want to develop a plan. These things, parts of your system really don't meet what we would consider, modern standards, safety in particular, and having resiliency or redundancies to be able to bypass flows, et cetera. So we've had a long conversation, for the entire time I've been here. I have to say it's been a pretty good communication. I think Brian Getz could certainly speak to that more and how well the two sides work together to resolve this issue of, are we measuring the water correctly? So.
Any other questions from the council? Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I just, looking back through this agreement, it's more of a statement than a question. We have a 45-year relationship with Newcastle, working and this agreement, we signed our original agreement in 1978. So for 45 years, we've worked closely with them, and they've been sending their wastewater to Pierce Island for treatment. I don't have any questions about whether or not at this stage I should be concerned about that relationship souring necessarily in the next 20 years. I do feel like we have a very good out clause here, but I don't see that as being, hopefully, not necessary because we have an established relationship that is a good one. So I will support this. I think we have asked the right questions so far, and I think that there has been a very good response from Newcastle in working through our questions.
I will support this as well. Ultimately, the goal of this agreement is to make sure that Newcastle is able to invest at the same rate as Portsmouth in the infrastructure of the pipes. I believe that is accomplished. The questions that we had at the last meeting made their way into the document that is presented in front of us. That's important because we want to make sure that all the communities that we we collectively treat wastewater and send into the bay are making this same or better improvements into their infrastructure as possible so that it all gets to the treatment facility. We celebrate 400 years this year. It's tough to tell. 400 years ago, we were all Strawberry Bank at that point. So the idea that we would be signing an agreement to have an agreement for the first time in 15 years on the 400th founding of our city of Portsmouth, I think is somewhat poetic, I guess, but I think long-term, this is going to enable the town of Newcastle to invest in their infrastructure, which is the goal of anybody, because we know, or any town needs to invest in infrastructure, and this will allow them to do so at a faster and better clip, and I look forward to that. Councilor Tabor.
Yes, I agree. The fact that the 20-year term gives the stability to go to the state revolving loan fund, I think is important because it enables the improvements to this system in Newcastle to happen in an affordable way. So that answered my question, satisfied my concern. I'll be 88 in 20 years, so probably the last thing I'm going to worry about.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, so there's not a motion?
There's not a motion, yeah. I was
We
gonna
were
say.
talking that whole time without a motion?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I'd
Got
make
it.
a motion that I recommend the city council move to authorize the city manager to accept all changes to the draft wholesale sewer agreement as proposed to finalize and execute it.
Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. All right. Thank you very much, Town of Newcastle. Next up, we are going to go to the held open public hearing on the budget. So
We also have a presentation here.
we have the presentation. I want to put the, let's see, I guess let's do the presentation first. If there's folks that want to speak, I never know whether or not we want to do the presentation first or second. I'm going to flip the coin and do the presentation first in case there are questions that are answered in the presentation, or conversely, if it raises questions for public comment. So, Karen,
Thank
or
you.
City Manager?
Thank you. We are here tonight with a handful of slides, and before I get started, I would like to share with the council publicly that late last week, for the 11th time, our AAA bond rating was affirmed, and we will be sharing the report along with the results of the bond sale, which will take place this Wednesday with the council and the public, so we're really proud of that. This presentation tonight is going to be a joint effort by myself, but really with Finance Director Judy Belanger and City Assessor Roseanne Lentz. We are looking to achieve several objectives through the presentation. We'd look to summarize how the proposed budget compares to previous years, showing key drivers and the recovery that we endured through the pandemic years. We also plan to show the dollar amount and percentage increases over the last 5 years. We like the opportunity to respond to comments and questions by both residents and the council during the budget process relative to the equalized assessed valuation and just what that means, along with information about how growth affects the total assessed value and how growth and the use of fund balance help to offset the tax rate. So we would close with a comparison of the city's budgetary growth relative to both the increase in Social Security and the Consumer Price Index. But what I'd like to say before I turn it over to Judy is that we're proud of this budget, which reflects the priority of management to control costs while providing services that residents wish to have. And this presentation will really show we've successfully navigated and weathered economic turmoil and uncertainty, and we feel confident about heading into recovery. So with that, I'll turn it to Judy. Thank you.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor and City Council members. I'm Judy Belanger, Director of Finance and Administration. And I think it's important to take some time, take a few minutes, and put the budget process in perspective, I'm going to start with walking through the last 4 years and the proposed FY24 budget with major initiatives in the recovery plan from COVID-19. The last 5 years has been very unusual in the history of preparing the budgets for Portsmouth. So I think it's important to highlight what happened beginning with FY20. So FY20 was our pre-pandemic stage where particular items that we're going to highlight more in the information technology and other operating expenses and some of the highlights in the non-operating section. Information technology was stagnant and stayed consistent over several years, utilizing outside consultants and not investing in the essential IT infrastructures that we had identified in the last couple of years. Under the non-operating, capital outlay policy has always been to appropriate no more than 2% of the prior year's general fund appropriations for annual capital outlay projects. In FY20, it was budgeted at $1.8 million, or 1.5% of that appropriation. Also, IT upgrades and replacements was about $1 million a year, and rolling stock was on average about $800,000. And this rolling stock is for replacement of our equipment and vehicles according to their useful life. So as we moved into FY21, as we know, this was the hit of COVID-19. There were a lot of dramatic efforts had to take place in preparing this budget because of the uncertainty of COVID. So as you can see from FY21 here in these same particular highlights, technology pretty much stayed the same in that department. There was no movement. Capital outlay was dramatically reduced by 30%. Upgrades to IT replacements decreased by 24%, and rolling stock decreased by 52%. We were at a very critical time in FY21, again, due to the uncertainties. We had no idea really what to expect and what we were going to see in the future. In FY22, we started to try to recover a little bit from the FY21 budget, but we also picked up a community campus in that particular year at the end of that year with a supplemental appropriation of $116,000. We still held tight with capital outlay. The $1 million, $80,000 was less than 1% of the appropriations. We saw some increase in the IT upgrades, the necessary infrastructure needs that we needed to move forward with. And rolling stock, we tried to recover and started to increase some of the more of the fleet. FY23 is where we saw a beginning of an evolution of our IT department. So there was a hiring of our CIO and 2 help desk personnel trying to move away from outside consultants. We also moved economic development that was funded elsewhere into the general fund. And then community campus, again, was going to cost more for operating in the FY23 budget. We still held tight with capital outlay. This is, again, less than 1% of the appropriations. We had more IT upgrades, a slight decrease of 7%, and then trying to, again, increase our rolling stock. So it brings us to FY24. And in FY24, again, the economic development, more increase in the information technology. I know Pat Ainsworth, our CIO, has gone through the IT budget with you very extensively, and more investment in community campus. Now we're moving, bringing capital outlay on the non-operating side, trying to bring it up to the levels of the pre-pandemic times. And the 1.8 million here represents 1.37 of the appropriations. More increase in the IT upgrades and the rolling stock. So again, yes, we've seen an increase in the FY24, really making the initiative to get out of the COVID time period and get back to our schedules of our long-term financial planning and taking care of our infrastructure. I do want to note that in FY22, also included a 4% salary adjustment for all the employees, totaling nearly $2.4 million due to inflation. I'm sorry, FY '23, I was just correcting, was the salary adjustments for our employees totaling $2.4 million due to the inflation and employee retention efforts. So the next slide points out the actual budget from each year, FY20 to the proposed budget at FY24. The final legal annual budget includes all supplemental appropriation. They are prepared on a budgetary basis, and each of these final budgets can be found in the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, or the ACFA, in the Statement of Revenues and Other Sources, Expenditures, and Other Uses, which is called the Budget to Actual Statement. So walking through again a little bit here, FY20 pre-pandemic times, FY21, you saw an increase of 0.4%. FY22 climbing out of COVID, but we had a 6.14% increase in that year with others, which included the supplemental appropriations. FY23, we had the use of one-time revenues, nearly $4.4 million, which reduced the tax rate or offset the tax rate by nearly 61 cents. And the proposed FY24 budget at 3.67%. So in total, over those particular 5 years, the budget increased $22.9 million, or 18.75%, or 3.755% on average of those 5 years. There have been some numbers thrown out there. I'm not quite sure. I think these numbers speak for themselves. These are directly out of the ACFA. Increases of the last 2 years of $19 million. I have the increase here from FY23 and 24 being $10.8 million. So I just wanted to highlight that because this is directly out of your ACFA report. As the city manager mentioned, there have been several questions and comments around property values and the questions about what is equalized value. So at this time, Roseanne Lentz, the city assessor, will walk you through the next 2 slides.
Good evening. So every year, the Department of Revenue Administration adjusts every community's modified assessed valuation by the weighted mean, which is the sales ratio. So the modified assessed valuation is reported annually on each community's inventory evaluation, which you all know as the MS1. The weighted mean sales ratio, which is the equalization ratio, is determined annually by the Department of Revenue, who conducts a sales ratio study of every community throughout the state using qualified market sales that occurred between October 1st and September 30th of every year. So in the chart below, I looked and tried to do a comparison for you of how they equalize the assessed valuation from between Portsmouth, Dover, and Rochester. So the first line represents the modified assessed valuation that's reported on the MS1. All of these numbers represent a percentage of market value. So like instead of 100%, Portsmouth was at 79% of market value approximately. Dover was at 91% of market value, and Rochester was at 73% of market value. And those are what those modified assessed valuations represent. Every year, the Department of Revenue does an inventory adjustment. This inventory adjustment is comprised of several categories off the MS1, which are equalized using the weighted mean sales ratio. So that DRA inventory adjustment represents the adjustment for market value. Then it's added to the bottom, or then those two numbers are added together, which equals the equalized assessed valuation. So what this does is instead of having everybody at 79%, 91%, 73%, that inventory adjustment is bringing everybody to 100% equal to one another versus all over the place. Those numbers, once they're equalized, puts everybody on the same plane. Then the Department of Revenue uses those numbers to determine your county tax obligation and the statewide property tax for each community. So it's a difficult equation, But the end result is they're trying to compare apples to apples instead of everybody all over the place. So that's the equalization process in the state of New Hampshire. The next slide I'd like to go into is a question that I get all the time is, we have so much commercial activity, where's the value? So if you look at this chart, it's comparing the commercial growth versus the residential growth. And because my last revaluation was in 2019, I'm able to show this comparison because I have not adjusted values throughout the community for the past few years. So in these charts, you can see from tax year 20 or tax year 19, 20, 21, and 22, you can see the growth is more weighted towards the residential side of the valuation than the commercial side. And that's because majority of our commercial properties in the downtown area are only commercial on that first level. The second, third, and fourth level are mainly condominiums, which is residential valuation. Also, if you look throughout the city, you'll see a lot of development going on, conversions of commercial properties to residential condominiums. So you're seeing more residential growth in the city of Portsmouth than you are seeing commercial growth in the city of Portsmouth. The next slide shows you how growth offsets the tax rate. So since we have not had a revaluation in 2019, we utilized the 2019 valuation, and we didn't change it for tax year 20, 21, 22, and 24, or fiscal year 21, 22, 23, and 24. So if that assessment
Please continue.
So if the assessed values did not change and there was no growth, you can see from this chart that the tax rate would have increased substantially without the growth that we've been having in the city of Portsmouth over the last several years. The orange line represents no growth. The blue line represents the growth that we've had throughout the city with no change to the base valuation year in 2019. So along with, and another thing I just wanted to make a statement is, along with growth, you also have an increase in services, which also will cause that tax rate to go up.
So how the use of fund balance offsets your taxes. So the tax rate is calculated using the adopted budget and any budgetary use of fund balance throughout the budget process. At the close of each year, any surplus in revenues or expenditures are closed to fund balance. And every year, the city utilizes fund balance to offset the tax rate. So we're using that surplus to help offset the tax rate and be able to maintain the services and handle any increase in services that the city has established. So typically, we use about $2 million to $2.5 million. In FY 23, we use $2.8 million in the budgetary process of fund balance. What this table, or this chart represents, again, is the differential between using fund balance, which is the blue line, which is the actual tax rate, and comparing that to if we didn't use any fund balance, if we didn't have any surplus at the end of each year, and what that tax rate would be with the current budgets that have been adopted. So, so this ranges between 2.2% to 4.2% differential in the use of fund balance. From fiscal year 17 to the proposed FY 24, in the budgetary process, we're utilizing $21.3 million of fund balance to offset your taxes. The next slide shows a comparison with Social Security increase versus the November to November Boston, Cambridge, Newton, Mass, New Hampshire Consumer Price Index. And we use that because that is the inflation or the CPI that we utilize through our collective bargaining. We use a 10-year rolling average, but these plotted percentages here are the actual CPI for that particular given year. So you can see early on in fiscal year 2021 that the CPI for November to November was actually a little higher than what the calendar Social Security rates were, but then as we get over into fiscal year 22 and forward, the rate for Social Security was a bit higher than the Consumer Price Index for the November to November. And then the next slide actually throws in the annual budget increase percentage for those same particular years in comparison with Social Security and the November to November Consumer Price Index. So the purple line represents what the budget increase was for that particular year. So you see in FY20 it was higher at 3.8. In FY21 it was below the Social Security in the November to November CPI, and then jumped in FY22 to over 6%, and then began to drop in FY23 to 4.75, and then with the proposed budget at 3.67. And as you can see, it is clearly below the Consumer Price Index of 7% and the Social Security increase of 8.7%.
So, Your Honor, that's what we have for our presentation, and we're happy to stop there.
Any questions from the council before we reopen the public hearing? Councilor Blaylock.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I want to thank the Finance Department for this presentation. This answers a lot of questions I know I've gotten through email and just in person. I know one question, obviously, people always ask, they see construction downtown, they see a new building go up. How is that helping my tax bill? So I really appreciate that, how the growth offsets your tax bill graph. And it shows that it helps. It's not going to bring your taxes down, but it's going to significantly reduce the amount that's being increased. But I thank you for this presentation. I'm glad that we're showing that numbers that have been said in the past are false information. The numbers here, I think, are clear as day and very transparent. So thank you.
Councilor Blaylock. Any other questions before we get to public hearing? I just had two. I think maybe just one for Roseanne. You did a fantastic job. I think I finally understand the equalized assessed valuation. Maybe it's helpful to understand, I see how they do it in that, what we are at 79% versus Dover at 91%. The state is making an effort to bring us all up to 100%. And you stated that that's for the purposes of assessing our county tax obligation, as well as for the statewide portion of the property tax, which goes to fund education, but then comes back, back to the cities and towns of which it's extracted from. Could you just go into a little bit of why it's important for maybe the state to understand the equalized value and so we can better understand it as a community? Why does the state need to know it for the county tax, or why does the state need to know it for the statewide property tax?
I think that's
That might be a Judy question.
I think that's a better question.
Or an Andrew question.
Or an Andrew
We got a whole, I'm going to put it at that table.
Yeah, so with the county, everybody has to be at 100%. What they do is they value the whole county at 100%. So Portsmouth we pay about 11% of the county tax because we are 11% of the equalized value of the entire county. So we pay 11% of the county tax. So if everybody's at 100%, let's say it's, the county's 100 billion. We will get we'll pay our share, and every town will pay their share based on their weight of the equalized value.
Thank you. And I think that this is more of a comment. You do not need to respond to this, but it is interesting that the state chooses to not use population when assessing how much we pay, but they do use population when they assess how much we get, namely from the room and meals tax.
That is correct.
It's very interesting that the math changes on that.
Yep.
I guess just on revenues, a comment on the overall budget and what this paints clear for, I think, most counselors and those watching at home, that as collective bargaining and cost of living adjustments do increase, but revenues from the state do not, that is going to present a problem, especially in future years. And so I think that everybody has to be mindful of the effects of less revenue from the state of New Hampshire coming in, because it's going to be making up a larger and larger percent going forward. But thank you again to all of the work that went into this, especially just putting the numbers on a trailing 5-year period. I think that's incredibly helpful. And then for answering, why do we have these two different property of assessed valuations? I think that's helpful to hear, and again, appreciate all of the work that goes into this, probably the toughest job in Portsmouth, telling people, how much you got to pay for stuff and how much it's coming from you. So appreciate the care that you put into it and the professionalism you deliver us the information we need to make decisions. So with that, I'll excuse you from the table of the day, and we'll reopen the public hearing for anyone want to speak. Again, just try to keep 3 minutes in your heart, but it's unlimited. And please step up to the microphone. Just state your name, city, and share your thoughts on the budget.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Paige Trace, 27 Hancock Street. I have a couple of questions that are probably more micro than macro this evening, but one of them is large enough for me to have taken notice, and that's the fact that the GSA is holding their public auction of the McIntyre building next Tuesday with a minimum bid of $5 million. You all won't be having a meeting between now and then. Your lease agreement that you signed allows you the ability to go in and bid on it. I pose no thought process one way or another. I'm simply about the transparency or lack thereof that you have one of the largest parcels of land in the heart of Portsmouth being auctioned off on Tuesday. And where was the discussion or the deliberation? Do you have the $5 million minimum bid? Is that something that you've considered? Or going further with a $50,000 bid thereafter? Is that in the budget? And if it is in the budget, then how the heck is it that a group of concerned citizens took it upon themselves, both merchants and restaurateurs, to plant Commercial Alley? And where was the city? Supposedly the city couldn't afford it. $1,000. And we're worrying about the lack of transparency with $5 million with this budget. June 13th, next Tuesday, comes quickly. If I have that date correctly, probably I do. Yep. So that's my question to all of you, is what is the state of McIntyre? You all voted that you thought you might want to do something about it, but you weren't sure and you were going to leave your options open. And now we're going to do it on the fly, or not give the residents of Portsmouth the fair and due diligence and communication that they deserve on this important issue. How many years? And you're just going to let it fly by? Or are you going to bid and then go, guess what? We bought a building. So that's my question. You can't afford $1,000 to help some residents out from the budget, but you can go buy a building for $5 million. Maybe, maybe not. None of you have discussed it with the public. Shame on all of you. And shame on the increase of a very bloated budget. As a taxpayer, with a reval coming up, I can't thank you all enough. Good night.
Well, thank you, Paige.
Good evening, Mayor, councilors, Zelita Morgan, Richard Zev. I'd like to address you tonight on a budget that you'll be voting pretty soon. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. So I have never been a big fan of those statements that, budgets are like moral statements, But they undoubtedly, budgets are consequential. And I would like you to keep that in mind. Budgets are consequential. In many ways, budgets impact the social fabric of a community. More so in New Hampshire, where taxes are paid based not on one's ability to pay, but rather on the value of a property. The budget you are about to approve is consequential. You ran for the seat you occupy, raising the flag of affordability and of affordable housing. About 2-3 years ago, 4 gentlemen paid $55 million for a nice trip to the Earth's orbit. They could afford it. I don't have a problem with that. But I think what we need from you is more transparency on what you define as affordable. It is like $30,000 per year, $50,000 a year. I know the median household income in Portsmouth has increased. We know wealth has moved into the city incredibly. We have at least 12 wealth management companies in the city, right? So with all your talk of affordability, what you control is the budget. It's how we spend the money. And I know I sound like a broken record, but it's true. And I have heard, I appreciate some of the questions that I've seen some counselors present during the process, especially coming from the CIO presentation and others. But a lot of the hiring we are doing, these days people are not doing that hiring. Even if people are working on a project, people are coming in working on a project as contractors. And then along the time, when you're ready, you can evaluate and make a proposal for a person to become a permanent employee. I'm just giving you examples, I'm also giving you an example. I spoke about this before. You gave like a baseline of 4% for the administration to start working with from your budget. When real world says, and we know this, you go back to 0. You start from that's your baseline. So how do you reconcile that with your talk of affordability? I mean, what is affordable to you? Who do you want the city to be affordable to? So I think affordability is subjective, right? In 2015, we had the city council had, and I was on the council, we were honored to bring to fruition the African American burial ground. That was an incredible statement from our city. Statement about invisible lives, people who had been forgotten, never recognized their contributions. And we walked out of that. Years have passed. What have we learned? How many lives are we leaving behind? Do you know how many people are just leaving because after they have raised their children, after they had volunteered on our boards, paid for our schools, paid for improvements, they are now faced with, well, I don't think I can afford this, right? How many more invisible people do we have these days in our city? How can a person who works in a restaurant serving you live in this city? I would like you to ask that question to yourselves before, you make further decisions. And I don't know, I don't think anything is going to change. I'm just sharing with you honestly that it is heartbreaking that the city of open arms, that so many fought and worked hard to truly be welcoming, just close its arms to those who have worked for it. Too many. You're leaving people behind. Now, it's your decision. You will be the one voting on it. So I really hope that when you were over there at each resolution, you can truly come to terms that you are having a consequential vote. And you are having a consequential vote to the social fabric of our community. Let's be honest. People don't like to talk about the social things, right? That's why sustainability, we never get to that pillow, which is like the human, right? We never get to that pillar. We talk about the environment, we talk about this, but talk about the human, the needs to attend humans. That's the most difficult part of it. And that's a challenge. That's a challenge. But I challenge you. So, again, thank you for your service. Thank you for all that you do. And I just hope that we won't regret and that we won't leave invisible people behind. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zelita.
Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave. The number one thing you have to do as a council is do the budget. So I've heard tonight that there's questioning of our figures that people are saying. And so I did some research. It was a rainy Sunday. And in that research, I went back and looked at meeting minutes in June for all the times the council voted on a budget. On June 4th, 2018, the budget was voted for $113,009,093. On June 3rd, 2019, the budget was voted on by a council for $118,638,630. On June 22nd, 2020, a budget was voted by a council for $905,338. On June 7th, 2021, a council voted for $123,209,033. On June 6th, your council, 2022, you voted on a budget of $131,283,375. Tonight, June 5th, 2023, you're proposing a budget of $137,283,375. From 2020 to 2021, the voted budget, that's our figure. You can see it in the meeting minutes, and you can see it online when it talks about the finances, was $8,074,342. That's the difference. On 2021-2022, it was $6 million. So this council, for a total of $74,342. The dilemma we have, folks, is you've also agreed, by voting tonight, if you vote on the budget, to take from the fund balance $4,428,378. So if you total everything up, and we don't usually take from the fund balance, we were kind of caught off guard on that. That's a new phenomenon. But if you total everything up, just looking at the voted budgets, we are looking at $18,502,720. I have said all along, the problem is in positions. 36 positions, a lot of positions. And what upsets me even more is we're only adding one social worker. We know mental health is huge, and we're only adding one social worker to the police. I've asked to look at psychologists. I've asked to look at other social workers. I could probably take that position because I know in our culture, with the mental health crisis that our police and fire departments are going through, we should probably look at that. I ask you to look at the positions because those continue on. They're high cost. Do you really need the technology positions? Or is it better to contract? Do you really need some of these other positions that have been added? Because that's where the majority of the budget goes to. We know human resource is where it goes. And I don't care if you're sitting in a school like Nate, or if you're sitting where the city manager is sitting. The money is going to human resource. So I encourage you to look at those positions. I give you where the figures came from. They are by the votes that were made on those dates. And I would encourage anyone at home or any of you to go look at the meeting minutes, and you can go online and you can look at the voted budgets. So that right now, on voted budgets alone, it's $18,502,720. If you add the fund balance that for the first time this council is using to offset the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. And again, we have one more speaker.
Teacher Huda, 280 South Street. Sorry, Mayor. Before you vote to accept this budget tonight, I strongly suggest this council ask for a 3.2% cut from this 137.3 budget. You are the only ones who can ask for this cut. As explained to you by the finance director at the 522 budget session, when you start using your fund balance or your surpluses to fund operations, and that's really what you're doing here, it sends up a red flag in the finance community. Not just to finance people, also to Standard & Poor's. And that will affect you maintaining the AAA rating that we've so long enjoyed. So I'd like to go back. I know we've discussed this till the cows come home, but I'm going to go back and talk about what happened in 23 and 24. In 23, you gave an across-the-board percentage increase, as was discussed, of 4%. You asked for, and I guess received, 27 new positions. In FY24, you're asking for 9 more. Also in the FY24 budget, and on page 4, it says the city manager is asking to give a step increase to all personnel not yet at the top of their level. HR people, I ask you, is this creating an atmosphere of entitlement? Am I entitled to an increase just because I'm here? Some of us have lived this through prior jobs. What is the incentive to do a great job if I just get an increase without any performance review? Is that what's really happening here? So, next I'll move on to the personnel. Does the city really need 9 more personnel? Let's talk about the request for the legal department. Another attorney. So I would ask you in this area, why is the deputy city manager, who has a salary of $165,000 a year, taking notes in the governance committee when we have $30,000 in the general services for note takers? Do you think that's the best use of taxpayer dollars? The IT budget. I have exceptions, and I'm having a real hard time understanding the explanation that was given about upgrading the finance, the whole finance accounting area. If I was understanding correctly what was presented to us, it sounded like we were going to be, first of all, hiring a new deputy city finance director. That would make 2, to help us with this transition. It also sounded like we were going to hire a project manager and a project engineer to help us with this transition. I have much experience in this area, and I know a few counselors also have that. Generally, when you add an upgrade to your finance area, it's a finance package. It contains modules. These modules are implemented in a certain order. So it's very confusing to me that we would need project engineers and more project managers to do this. My concern would be, do we have on staff anybody who has the ability to evaluate these packages to bring this on board? On that, I would like to suggest that the new auditor, CLA, that we signed a contract with is very skilled in this area and could help you very much so in the implementation of anything going forward as far as finance and accounting. So I ask you, on the surpluses, on using the fund balance, please consider just using your regular operating revenue and not taking down your fund balances. This is a big red flag to everybody, and it was clearly explained to you by your own finance director. I hope you do the right thing for the residents of Portsmouth. And Mr. Mayor, just remember what Julie said. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra. Any other speakers?
Hello. We're talking about, Sean Muskie, Sherman Avenue, Portsmouth, New Hampshire. We're talking about budgets now, and we're on the verge of giving away attractive land. We know what Beth Moreau and her team is going to present tonight when it comes to the Sherburne School, and we're on the verge of giving land away, and we're talking about budgets. Why are we giving land away? when it's not going to benefit the town financially. There's a much better uses for that land. We shouldn't be giving away land when we could actually benefit from it financially. It just doesn't make sense. You know, I'm going to be very short in these comments. It's just beyond my, anything I can think of is why a town would give away land. It's so very short-sighted. We don't know what the town's going to need 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road. And we're giving land away. We're giving it away. And we're here talking about budgets. That's directly related to that budget. Maybe not this budget or the next budget, but that's going to affect the town down the road. Land is the heart, is the lifeblood of a city. And we're just going to give it away. There's so many people against this. The neighborhood is overwhelmingly against what's going in there. And we're just going to give it away. It's a bad idea. It's bad all around. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Any other speakers? Okay, I will close the public hearing on the budget. Any comments? I would just make, I guess, just one for the speaker had mentioned the times when we vote on budgets. Just want to clarify another vote that we took specifically in the FY22 year. That was December 21st, where we approved, the previous council approved $2.2 million for the skate park with other fund balances. That's why you see the difference of $126 million versus $123 million. It was the appropriations that we had. And another comment was, how much do we use fund balance? Over the last 8 years, we've used on average $3.8 million per year from fund balance. So those are just some clarifications, but happy to entertain other questions. Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. I was going to follow up with that, every single year, as far back as I've looked at it, there's been a fund balance contribution to the budget. So that's nothing unusual. I would say, I think the mayor says this a lot, the budget is your values. And I think that's really true, because when people talk about cutting the budget or reducing taxes, at the face it sounds good. But then when you start to talk about how you do that, do you get rid of trash and recycling pickup? Do you get rid of things like Spinnaker Point, the indoor pool, the outdoor pool, the great rec department programs we have, the fields, the skate park, our wonderful library? Do we make cuts there? Do we not reapprove the social worker at the middle school? Do we not, add the social worker position to the police department? I think the general consensus of this community is that these are things that we need, and these are things that we are proud of. And unfortunately, they cost a significant amount of money. And it is more challenging for some than others to pay their property taxes. And, the system that we have in New Hampshire is the system that we have. We can't change it from here on the council. But we don't want to make cuts to the things that make Portsmouth what it is. So I think this is a very good budget. I do think we need to keep an eye towards the future as costs are going to continue to rise. We had a very long period of low inflation. We've had a couple of years of rather high inflation, and it's impossible to predict what will happen in the future. But I mean, I commend the city for putting together a good budget. We had to reduce capital outlays, rolling stock outlays at the early stages of COVID. If you put off putting tires and brakes on your car for a year so you can save some money, 2 years down the road, you got to spend twice as much, because not only do you have to do your brakes and tires, but you probably have to replace some other things as well, and they all come due at once. And I think we're seeing a little bit of that happening here with the budget. So I'm going to be happy to support the budget today. I think we have a great city, and I applaud. I think it was Councilor Tabor who had the idea to greatly increase the senior tax abatement, not just the level of last year, but also the amount of capital assets they could have outside of their home. Councilor Denon for bringing forward the veteran discounts. we don't have many tools in the toolbox to try and reduce the taxes for the people that can't pay them. But I think this council and previous councils are doing a good job of making use of those tools. But we don't want to be in a town or a city where we cut the budget so thin that we lose all of the great features that our town has that makes it such a great community.
Thank you, Councilor Bagley. Any other comments or questions? Councilor Tabor.
Thanks, Your Honor. I'm going to support this budget, and I wanted to try and convince the rest of you to support this budget by pointing out a few things I think make good sense. First of all, we are in a time of 6 to 7% inflation, and the total budget increase is only 3.67%. We get some good guys from some bonds rolling off and the state retirement fund, but net, I think 3.67% as a spending increase in these times is pretty good. We lose some state money, 3.8 million of state money in revenue, and that forces us to take the taxes up to replace that. We've used some fund balance, but I think we've used it prudently. The key question I asked when we discussed fund balance was, where will we end up at the end of FY24? And our finance director is pretty confident that our fund balance will remain the same, will remain strong. Naturally the question is, could we trim some things? And it comes down to positions. There's some big asks and there's some little asks. I think the little asks are all common sense. A position to support more rec programs, a lifeguard at the pool. Those kind of single positions cost the average household less than $10. But we should have our pool open all the time. We're expanding our rec programs because they're really good. We've got a social worker for the police. I think all the research that's happening in law enforcement shows that that's effective. I'll give you one, for instance. There's a town in Connecticut, Milford, Connecticut, added 2 social workers. Before, they had 84 people who were responsible for 683 calls to their police department. After they added the social workers, those 84 people only called the police station 69 times. So we're seeing a dramatic change in how we staff police and how we deal with the growing mental health problems. And it doesn't always make sense to send a police officer. It does make sense to add a social worker. The big asks are the IT department for $690,000, and those are big increases. It's $50 for the average taxpayer for our IT increase. But look, we've got computers that are so old they don't run the new operating systems. We've got a need for a good accounting platform that seamlessly integrates with everything else. This isn't necessarily general fund, but it's an example of our systems. We can't get police call data because it's commingled with fire data, and it's not even on the fiscal year. So, in the long term, if we make this investment, we're going to get better integration, more efficiency, better data to make decisions, and I think it's in the best interest of the city to upgrade our IT platforms and get the staff to do that correctly. It is the big ask of this budget. We came into office and we had an email outage for 3 days. We've underinvested in this for years, and we need to fix it. It's just like any other infrastructure, like our parking garage or our streets. We have to invest in it, and we're going to be better off for it. And I'm someone who's advocated tight budgets in the past, but it'd be penny wise and pound foolish to stop the investment that we're making in this, in my opinion. In the finance department, we face retirements. We have to make sure that we backstop that. and ensure continuity, and I think that is a reasonable ask. And the school department, social worker there is a good move. I would support that. You know, we're in an era when 16% of teenagers in this country have made a suicide plan. That's the kind of mental health situation we face in our schools. It's worked in the high school. We want to add one in the middle school. There's no question it's effective, and I think that's a good investment. So we also see the schools tapering off their manpower as enrollments decline, for example, in Little Harbor. So I think they're being responsible, and they're putting positions where they're needed, and they're putting the right human skills where they're needed. And lastly, you know, the math tutor, we know there's testing results that kids have not caught up because of COVID, and we can't be a first-rate school system that attracts quality families if we're letting kids fall behind grade level. So we have to make those investments. So for those reasons, I think there are new positions in this budget. There are new positions that reflect the changing world we're in, with mental health problems that need addressing, with IT problems that need infrastructure improvements and better efficiency, and investment in education of our kids. So that's why I support it.
Thank you, Councilor Tabor. Any other comments? Councilor Blaylock, then Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Honor. We were elected by the taxpayers to represent you up here, and I don't take that job lightly at all. Any increase in any budget, I know, is going to have an impact on all of us, especially those that are more encumbered financially, especially those on a fixed income. That is not lost on me. I lose sleep over that. I lose sleep over any increase. That being said, we need to do business appropriately and take care of our town so we can take care of our people. I think the people of this town are the lifeblood, and especially our youth. So I will always advocate for supporting our schools. I'm a product of Portsmouth school system. I'm proud of that, and I want the students today to be able to say the same thing in the future. But that being said, I will be supporting this budget. I think the increases are less than the increases in inflation. They're less. I'm glad to see Social Security has gone up more than this increase. But I'll say any increase is still a burden, I know. But I'll be supporting this.
Councilor Blaylock, Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I really appreciate the comments from Councilors Tabor, Councilors Bagley, and Councilors Blaylock tonight. I think that they very effectively addressed why we have to support this budget. But I share their thoughts, and I really do appreciate, especially the comments on IT expansion and the need for that. I personally have experienced what it's like when an organization doesn't invest in their IT and the security around that. I don't know how many here are aware that just a little over 5 years ago, every physician in the state of New Hampshire had their identity stolen because of a lack of investment in security infrastructure around IT. And so there are serious security concerns when you don't invest in IT infrastructure, and we haven't been doing that for years in the city of Portsmouth, and we need to make sure that we are investing appropriately in our IT infrastructure. But most importantly, I want to talk a little bit about employment contracts, and that being really a driver for this budget. There's a reason why the city of Portsmouth and this council negotiated increases in employment contracts, and that 4% across the board increase. And it's because if we don't pay people enough money, they don't stay. And we lose talent in the city of Portsmouth, and it costs more money to recruit new talent and to retain that new talent. When I was looking at this budget and that driver in particular, I asked specifically for data around how many employees in the city of Portsmouth make below the median income for the city of Portsmouth. And when you're looking at the general government, that's 80.6% of our city employees make below the median. Fire, and those are individuals that have already received increases and had negotiated contracts. For fire and police, it's 86.4% and 86.3%. In schools, it's 53.7%. Now, those are household incomes, and a lot of you are sitting back there and saying, well, these are households. People have two incomes. But if you look at the marriage rates in the state of New Hampshire, approximately 50% of people in the state are not married, adults over 15, anybody over 15. So if I look at those percentages, I would say, half of those individuals are making below the median, and they're trying to keep up in the city of Portsmouth. They're trying to keep up with that median average income just so they can stay here, just so they can afford housing, just they can afford their daily lives. We have to think seriously about the amount of money we pay our civil servants in the city if we want to retain them, if we don't want to lose them. We know that we've had challenges around hiring, specifically hiring with police and fire. And we know we're not retaining employees in the education department either because they cannot afford to stay here. As their commutes get longer and longer because of cost of living in Portsmouth, we will lose more of them. That means that employment and the cost of employment is going to continue to be a driver of the budget in Portsmouth for a long period of time, not just for today. It's not just this budget. As the cost of living increases, employment costs will go up in the city of Portsmouth. And in this case, the budget was kept well below that rate of increase, which means the city staff managed to cut the budget for non-employment contract related expenses. We're at 3.67% as far as an increase in budget, rather than being at 4% or 6% or 7%, which is the rate of inflation. So I commend the city manager and the entire staff of the city for managing to keep us under the inflation rate and even under the rate of our employment contract increases.
Thank you, Councilor Cook. Any other comments, questions? Okay. I will share a few before asking to go through a considerable amount of resolutions. First, echoing a bit of what Councilor Cook says, I think everyone expects government to be run like a business. And I hear that a lot from everybody that owns a home and gets a tax bill. They expect government to be run like a business. The only difference that a business is that we don't go out of business as a government. And given that we need employees, given that we need good employees, we have to compete for those good employees to provide good services. And we're surrounded by other towns and municipalities, and our fine city employees can take their talents elsewhere. And we haven't really had much of that until the last few years. And I think it was the first one we saw in the police department. It's difficult to hire and fire. It is something that we see in municipal city hall. So it's difficult. I don't want to spend any more than we have to, but we can't spend less than we need to. Some of it is contractual, but it's about delivering services. We've had many budget meetings, a number of them. I have yet to hear a list of things that we would like cut. There's usually a disagreement about adding positions generally, but not the social worker, not the lifeguard, not the dispatcher, wasn't the social worker or the math tutor. It's been very difficult to get specifics on which person that we would cut, and that speaks to a broader point, that a budget, while people might disagree that it shows the values, maybe I'll put it differently. A budget speaks to everyone, but not everyone at the same time. There are many people that this budget speaks to very loudly, and they agree with most everything in it. Some people just speak speaks to part of the needs or desires or wants. But we have to collectively think of all the needs in Portsmouth, and I think that this budget does, I believe that this budget does as good as we are going to do on that. One thing that it is frustrating, and we mentioned it with the funny math that Concord does when it comes to assessing how much money we send to Rockingham County, which we're a proud member of the Rockingham County. But they use total valuation to determine our share there, and the state uses population when it comes to divvying up the $35 million or so that we send in terms of room and meals tax, and decides to give us back 1.8. It is true that in the state of New Hampshire, we only have a property tax, but my house isn't working for me, and it's not working for you. People pay property taxes, regardless of whether or not what we're going to call it. People pay property taxes. So I am incredibly proud that this council, first under the leadership of Josh Dent, before the ink was signed on the veterans, increase the veterans tax credit, he had it in our email boxes to increase it to the maximum amount allowed by the state. We had to actually hold off on the vote because it actually had to get passed first. So I commend him for that. I commend this council for, and also with working with Roseanne in our assessors department to figure out a way how we could lead the state in both salary that would qualify you for a disabled and elderly tax exemption, and also the assets that are available to that. Far and away better than any other place in New Hampshire, we're making so that if you are a senior living on a fixed income and you qualify from an income level, and we've increased the asset levels to $500,000, that you can have a reduction on your property taxes. That is huge. And I hope that everybody looks into that and comes and bothers me, and then I'll direct you down to Roseanne, where we can help you apply for that. And I know that we've extended the window to that. But ultimately, we're going to vote on a budget that keeps us safe, the number one job of government, that provides the services that we've come to expect, that aligns with some of the things that has brought this community together, like a skate park. It is going to be, it's not going to be easy, and I think in the years to come, as we see these cost of living adjustments compared to the state revenues, we're going to have ways to bend that curve. But I appreciate the work that has gone into this budget, and I appreciate, even the school board looking to take positions out of ESSER to think ahead on that before. It would have been probably easier to just fund them and then talk about it next year, but there's some hard decisions that have made here that are going to make the conversations to come easier. So I will be supporting this budget, and with that, I will call for I would ask for a motion to adopt resolution number 9, 2023 municipal fees.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
We have to
Oh, roll call vote? That's right. That's right. Don't do too many of these budget votes. But Kelly, this is going to be a lot of work.
It's okay.
Number 9. Assistant Mayor Kelly,
Yes.
Counselor Tabor,
Yes.
Counselor Denton,
Yes.
Counselor Moreau,
Yes.
Counselor Bagley,
Yes.
Counselor Lombardi,
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock,
Yes.
Counselor Cook,
Yes.
Mayor McCackron.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Now await a motion to adopt resolution number 10, 2023 general fund expenditures.
So moved.
Second.
Assistant Mayor Kelly,
Yes.
Counselor Tabor,
Yes.
Counselor Denton,
Yes.
Counselor Moreau,
Yes.
Counselor Bagley,
Yes.
Counselor Lombardi,
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock,
Yes.
Counselor Cook,
Yes.
Mayor McCackron.
Yes.
Unanimous.
I'd wait a motion to adopt resolution number 11, 2023 water fund expenditures.
So moved.
Second.
Assistant Mayor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Tabor?
Yes.
Counselor Denton?
Yes.
Counselor Moreau?
Yes.
Counselor Bagley?
Yes.
Counselor Lombardi?
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock?
Yes.
Counselor Cook? Yes. Mayor McCacken?
Yes.
Unanimous.
I'd await a motion to adopt Resolution Number 12, 2023, Sewer Fund Expenditures.
So moved.
Second?
Assistant Mayor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Tabor?
Yes.
Counselor Denton?
Yes.
Counselor Moreau?
Yes.
Counselor Bagley?
Yes.
Counselor Lombardi?
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock?
Yes.
Counselor Cook? Yes. Mayor McCacken?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Await a motion to adopt Resolution Number 13, 2023, Special Revenues, including American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, Debt Service, Fund and Committee Fund Balance for necessary expenditures.
So moved.
Second?
Assistant Mayor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Tabor?
Yes.
Counselor Denton?
Yes.
Counselor Moreau?
Yes.
Counselor Bagley?
Yes.
Counselor Lombardi?
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock?
Yes.
Counselor Cook?
Yes.
Mayor McCacken?
Yes.
Unanimous.
I'd await a motion to adopt Resolution Number 14, 2023, Investment Policy.
So moved?
Second?
Just gotta turn the page.
I tell you, doing a lot of work on this.
Assistant Mayor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Tabor?
Yes.
Counselor Denton?
Yes.
Counselor Moreau?
Yes.
Counselor Bagley?
Yes.
Counselor Lombardi?
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock?
Yes.
Counselor Cook?
Yes.
Mayor McCacken?
Yes.
Unanimous, you passed the budget.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, City Manager. We'll
Thank
take
you to
a,
the staff.
and thank you to staff who's been here for any questions at all that we've had. Appreciate all the work that you do on behalf of the citizens of Portsmouth. With that, we will take a 6-minute recess and return here at 9:30. Welcome back. We have a first reading of an ordinance. This is just the first reading of ordinance. We will discuss it in depth with the public hearing at the next council meeting. But amending Chapter 4, Article 1, Food Licensing and Regulations, Section 4.101, adoption of the FDA 2022 Food Code, Section 4.102, amendments, additions, and deletions to Food Code, Section 4.103, adoption of specific parts HE-P 2300 as amended, and Section 4.107, term of license. I'd wait a motion to pass first reading and schedule a public hearing and second reading for June 20th, 2023 City Council meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And we are now back to the city manager, who has a second item under her name.
Thank you, Your Honor. The request is for a temporary construction license for Lucky 13 Properties LLC for property located at 147 Congress Street. As you have experienced, perhaps, if you've been in the area, that the owner is constructing an addition to the building along the front and rear canopies, and the owner has encumbered the sidewalks that abut the property along both Congress and Maplewood, and the encumbrance permit currently in existence is set to expire on June 13th. And in order to encumber the sidewalk on each street beyond that period, the council needs to approve. So the request is for work to be done in two phases. The 1,401 square feet of sidewalk along Maplewood Ave would be encumbered for 4 months, and the 500 square feet of sidewalk along Congress Street would be encumbered for 2 months. And the math here is in your packet. The total license fee to be paid to the city is $9,976. And there's a series of updates that I could read, but I will hesitate to do that because both the owner of the property and the project manager for the contractor are both here to give an update if that is so desired by the council.
Are there questions of the council? Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a question actually for the city manager or her staff around pedestrian flow in this area. We haven't hit the height of tourist season yet in the summer, and I would anticipate that in the time frame that we're looking at, we could have significant. I don't think my mic is working.
There could be a phone that's too close to the microphone if anyone has that.
Okay. Okay, it's working. I would anticipate that during that specific time frame, we would have high pedestrian flow at that location. I just want to know what we're doing, what DPW is doing to make sure that we have appropriate signage and redirection of pedestrian traffic.
Right, and all of the requirements relative to signage and rerouting of pedestrians is incorporated into the Construction Mitigation and Management Program. Assistant City Attorney Jane Farini is here to speak to that, as well as the owner and the project manager, if you want to hear about that. So if it's okay, I'd have Jane come up. Thank you, Jane.
Welcome, Jane.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I can make one, before we go on the crossing, to answer the crossing question, I know there's some question about sidewalks and this being a very busy corner in the city. We've been talking almost daily with the owner and the contractor, and the 2-month encumbrance for Congress Street, technically, they'll probably only close that sidewalk for about 2 weeks. But since construction ebbs and flows and it's not 2 consecutive weeks, they put the 2-month duration in the license for approval so that, we would have some accuracy. So we wanted you to know, as far as pedestrian and pedestrian crossing, that sidewalk is not, on Congress, is not going to be encumbered for the full 2 months. So that's good. And so then there's access for the normal crossing right there. I think there is particular signage was approved in the CMMP. There's signage, sidewalk closed ahead down off Chestnut. So there'll be signage there, and there's signage at the corner of the property at Maplewood as well. So there's already a plan for signage for pedestrian crossing.
Councilor Denton?
I have more of a comment than a question because I raised the question for staff prior when they addressed it. I guess first and foremost, I'm looking forward to this building being, I guess, brought up to date. But my concern specifically dealt with paragraph 12 when it came to contractor or subcontractor parking. Because I know normally, and in this contract it says they can't park on the street, but there were lots there. But this issue is not just with this property, and I was told that the city's going to look at a more global approach to whether contractors or subcontractors could park in parking lots. So I'm looking forward to seeing what staff comes up with for future agreements.
Yes, thank you. We had a preliminary meeting with Planning and Legal to address the fact that we're having a lot of construction and the busy construction season coming up with a couple of CMMPs coming forward. So rather than take those piecemeal, one at a time, the staff is going to talk with police and fire and kind of have internal conversations about the whole issue of contractor parking as we move forward, approving these developments. So thank you for the question.
Councilor Bagley?
Thank you, Your Honor. And, I think everybody knows that construction is disruptive, but I think this is going to dovetail nicely with the finishing of the Islington Street project. So that construction is about to start as well. And this space, once the construction's been completed, will be much more pedestrian friendly, I think, and more activated space. So I think having both of these areas kind of come up to date simultaneously, while it will be painful during the summer, we'll have many years of service afterwards.
Thank you, Councilor Bagley. Assistant Mayor.
Thank you. This may be more of a question for the project manager. So the Maplewood Ave, so you said that the Congress Street, you think just a total, you can come on up, just a total of roughly two weeks periodically. Now, Maplewood Ave, is that looking to be continuously blocked off and closed?
Yes, the addition along the side of the building.
Oh, sorry, just speaking to the mic.
Here.
The top, either or.
Oh, my name is Andrew Wilson.
Thank
I'm
you.
the project manager. The addition that we're building along the Maplewood Avenue side of the building is literally right up against the property line. The property line follows the sidewalk. In order for us to do construction on the addition, we need to access the, we need that sort of staging area that's where the sidewalk is in order to work on the building, to, put ladders up and, lifts to do the roofing and the windows and the trim and all that sort of thing. So yes, that Maplewood Avenue sidewalk will effectively remain closed until we're done with the construction. It's only a single-story building, so we're really trying to push to get it done as quickly as possible. We recognize the impact we're having on pedestrian traffic, and we certainly were hoping to start sooner than we were able to avoid the summer, but that's kind of where we're at.
In Congress Street, can we, would you plan that during those periods of time where it's closed, that any of those would be weekends?
We're trying to avoid that. One weekend where it's going to need to be likely to remain closed is actually this coming weekend. We're digging up, we have to put 3 piers on the front side of the building. We have to excavate 3 holes. And we have to put Jersey barriers up to prevent vehicles from driving into the holes. We are trying to get this all done and poured in during this week in like 4 days, but it's probably not going to be possible. We don't know what we're going to find when we start digging the holes. So we're trying to, but we plan on removing the Jersey barriers certainly by next week. And after we remove the Jersey barriers, we'll have temporary fencing up, which we will keep. We will certainly be able to maintain a 3-foot pathway on Congress Street on the sidewalk. And more likely, when we're not doing construction in that particular area, we'll pull the fencing back towards the building so that there'll be a much more clear path. I should also note that along the front of the building, Mr. Labrie owns 5 to 6 feet of the sidewalk along the front of the building. And that's his property technically. So, you know, the work that we do there doesn't need to be encumbered or licensed at all, really. So we're going to try and stay in that footprint anyway, but even not be in that footprint. We're trying as much as possible to have the least amount of impact as possible. So.
Thank you.
Councilor Lombardi?
Thank you, Mayor. This is a difficult pedestrian corner, and even with it wide open, people don't get how to navigate it very well. I just wonder, with barriers and stuff, I guess I'm concerned about visibility around the corner for pedestrians and for cars in that area.
Absolutely. We have developed a CMMP plan where there are diagrams showing, you know, where we place signage, and the signage has already been up, you know, sidewalk closed and that sort of thing, directing people to to cross the street and then go down the sidewalk and around, things of that nature. So we've done everything that we can possibly do to redirect pedestrians with the proper signage and the proper, you know, the highway. There's a certain diagrams that are standard for that. So we followed all those protocols.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor Tabor?
So it wasn't clear to me from the material we had, if I'm a pedestrian walking down Congress Street and I want to cross Maplewood, what's my experience when I get to the
Cross the street to the other side of Maplewood from
I'm
Congress.
walking past the loft.
Yep.
And coming past your building.
Yep.
So I'm going to take a jog to the left and go inside a Jersey barrier, or is that what I'll experience?
So again, during that sort of 2-week stretch where the Jersey barriers, where we are going to be taking up the sidewalk on Congress Street, before the loft, you'll be directed to cross the street at that crosswalk and go along in front of Jumpin' Jays in that area, and then cross the street there, and then cross back over to the other side of Islington at that point.
So the sidewalk would be completely unusable?
That is correct. Yep.
And what about evenings? Will it be?
When the Jersey barriers are there, we won't be able to, there'll be holes there, so we can't, it'll be too dangerous to allow the public to be on that sidewalk at all during that 1.5 week, 2-week period. Again, we're going to try and limit it to a 1.5 weeks. Once we get it backfilled, we're immediately going to temporarily pave it, and it will be open to pedestrians. And we have Severino doing the excavation. Everybody understands. We've been talking to Dave DeFosis and Eric Eby and working with, directly with the town to try and, we recognize that we need to do this as expeditiously as possible, and that's our goal.
So it's totally out of use. Pedestrians will have to cross over to the Jumpin' Jay side of Congress.
Yes, that is correct.
That's the workaround.
Yes.
But it's 2 weeks, you think?
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
And then if I'm coming up Maplewood from the Worth lot,
yep,
do I go out into Jersey barriers there?
No, you cross to the other side of Maplewood and go along the other parking lot across the street.
To the bridge lot? Okay.
Yeah.
Side.
Yep.
Okay.
Councilor Lombardi.
Yeah, follow up on Councilor Tabor. Maybe it would be wise to have signs in the Worth lot directing them to the Vaughan Mall end of that lot, because people have to cross, if they want to go down that side of Congress Street, they have to walk around a big square to
Right,
get
I understand,
there.
and
Yeah,
that's a good
so
point. That's a valid point. I'm not sure
Just
how we could create a sign.
well, in the Worth lot to direct people to Von Mall, I think.
Right, right. I will certainly ask, I'll talk to Eric Eby, and he might have some suggestions, but it's a logical way for people to go, for
Yeah.
sure. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions. First, I guess somewhat obviously, it's Market Square Day this weekend, so.
What is, okay.
Yes.
So if there's a time to lose
Sorry,
a
I didn't know
sidewalk, people will be in the street.
They sure will.
So
Yeah.
no need to worry about the sidewalk, particularly there, unless things are falling into the
Understood.
street.
Yes, good point, right.
So
no problem, right?
no problem probably for that portion of the weekend. I think that as my concerns are largely from understand that things have to happen and street closures have to happen, or sidewalk closures. Want to confirm that it's not a lane closure. I remember the first day I was driving up, there was a lane closure, but that's not the intended aspect of this, and we are not authorizing a lane closure. We're authorizing a sidewalk closure on the Maplewood side, correct?
So that is a part of this license agreement, yes. As part of our CMMP, we, during the days, we have been closing part of Maplewood Avenue itself. If we have, so for instance, we've had excavators setting Jersey barriers, we've been digging, and during the day, we've had a police detail there, and on a temporary basis, we had a concrete truck there yesterday, and the only way to.
Okay.
for
But all of
concrete
these
is
will
to-
be flagged then, or have a police detail? There's not
Police
going to be like
detail,
a
they're
surprise,
flagged.
like we're just closing this lane?
Correct.
And it looks official, so then people call us. Okay, but all of those would be police details flagged in advance of the city communication with the city on those occurrences.
Yeah, we're absolutely trying to communicate. I sent an email at 9:30 last night, trying to lay out the next 3 weeks and what we're doing.
Okay. I guess just to point on I would hope that as the conversations go to signage, we are, every lever you press, there's another lever that comes up. If we could also include the economic or the Sean Clancy, I'm forgetting, the Assistant City Manager in charge of Economic Development, just to make sure the businesses are aware if we're talking about rerouting foot traffic and it's potentially impacting a business. Obviously, we want to be safe, but we want to make sure that we are communicating with the businesses if we're going to reroute, say, from the Bridge Street lot to, say, go into the Worth lot, that, the folks on Upper Congress, would have potentially issue with that. So just trying to take in those stakeholders in that conversation.
And as part of our original process here, we did send out our CMMP package or we sent out a certified letter to all the list of the abutters. There was a list given to me by one of the folks with the city, and we sent out 60 certified letters to inform people. We had a meeting. Of course, nobody showed up to the meeting.
I assure you we will hear more about it.
I'm sure you will.
But thank you for answering the questions and for sticking around tonight.
Absolutely.
Look forward to this project being done and again, that building being updated. So thank you very much. Without any further questions, I would look for a motion to authorize the city manager to execute and accept the temporary construction license to encumber the sidewalks along Congress Street and Maplewood Avenue that abut 147 Congress Street as requested.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Good luck, gentlemen. Next up, I would wait a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Your Honor? Sorry.
Counselor Cook?
I move to divide the question into first sections A through C, and then separately section D of the consent agenda.
Okay, to remove section D from, you move to remove section D from the consent agenda. Okay, so I will await a motion to approve A, B, and C of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And now a letter from Mike Effenberger, Seacoast Jazz Society, requesting permission to hold a street performance in 3 locations: the Von Mall Stage, Market Square, by the North Church, and open space area by the tugboats for Jazz in the Streets on 5 Saturdays this summer: July 1st, 2023, July 7th, 2023, July 28th, 2023, August 5th, 2023, which happens to be my birthday, and August 19th, 2023, from 12:30 p.m. to 2 p.m. I'd await a motion to refer to the city manager with authority to act.
So moved.
Second.
Any comment? Counselor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I have to recuse myself because I'm on the board for the Seacoast Jazz Society.
Got it. All right. Any other questions?
Just a comment that it's nice to see this because I've missed the jazz on Ceres Street in the past, so this is great.
This is great. I'm glad it's coming back. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? 1 abstention. Next up, presentations and written communications. I'd wait a motion to accept and place on file the email correspondence.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next up is a letter from Sam Carty, Yellowfin Events LLC, requesting permission to hold the Bikes and Beers cycling event with Cisco Brewers to benefit the Bike Walk Alliance of New Hampshire on Saturday, July 22nd, 2023, at the Pease Trade Port. I'd wait a motion to refer to the city manager with authority to act.
So moved. Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Next up, a letter from Valerie Rochon, Managing Director of Portsmouth 400 Incorporated, requesting permission to install lawn signs on municipal property, primarily in the gateway areas, at the end of June and removed before the snow falls as part of PNH 400's overall marketing initiatives. I'd wait a motion. Oh,
Move to
yes,
refer.
is that, we don't have a sample motion, but I'd wait a motion to refer to the city manager with authority to act.
So moved. Second?
Got it.
Counselor Denton.
I do have a concern here. The 400th has been a lot of fun to date. The Grand Parade this past weekend was an awesome experience, especially for the Vietnam vets who got to ride in DeLoreans. However, my concern is that if we open this up to the 400th, installing lawn signs on municipal property, then that could open up to any organization, regardless of the message, to installing signs on city property. So I just ask that the city manager consider that if we send this your way.
And Councilor Denton, is the concern that this would set a precedent that we would not be able to regulate the placage of sign and approval of sign, or that it would necessitate or embolden more requests of the city itself?
The concern is if organizations wanted to put signs out that said something that some people might find offensive, we wouldn't be able to regulate it because we allowed signs to go on city property here. So it would have to be content neutral, any decision-making going forward. And these signs would be great, but if some other group came along and said, you know, we want to put up these offensive signs, it would be tough to say no.
Okay, so we're asking for a legal opinion on whether or not we can approve this as a matter of government speak or not.
So we discussed this earlier today.
Oh.
The sign ordinances, there's one in the city ordinance, and then there's another one in the zoning ordinance, both of which are not entirely clear as to whether you can have signs on municipal property, particularly for a temporary event that is not political advertising or for sale sign. So we have looked at that and believe that, number one, the ordinance needs some clarification in terms of the authority to even do this. But number two, it does run the risk of establishing some type of public forum for signs, and it would be a slippery slope. So our recommendation to the city manager is to decline the request.
Parliamentary inquiry. So does that, for the city manager to decline the request, does that mean we approve it and then with her authority to actually declines it? Or should we just not approve it as a council? What is cleaner?
We're not approved.
I think it's really in the hands of the city manager. So you're authorizing her to take whatever action she deems appropriate.
Okay, we will take the vote then. If more legal information comes to light during the conversation, or if more information comes to us from the Portsmouth 400th on alternative means to Councilor Morrell.
Would this prevent them from having people put it on private property?
No, but it's very strict, the regulations for even on private property, that under the zoning ordinance, it can occur for temporary purposes with the approval of the code official, and there's a certain time period that's required as well.
I think we need an updated sign ordinance.
We definitely need an updated sign.
That was my conclusion today.
Did we not approve something last year or the year before when it came to signage?
The water, P's, FAS, I believe signs.
It was the PFAS signs. We'd made an adjustment to the PFAS signs for private property, I believe. So maybe looking at that, because that was a singular event that focused on a specific date and time, which is driving awareness for a testing which was not, forever. And there were signs that were requested by Andrea Amico as a part of testing for Ps that we did approve.
So there is contradictory history here in terms of how this has been handled by the former city manager and staff versus this administration. And again, the ordinance is confusing and somewhat contradictory. So I think if the signs are for a government purpose, then you don't run the same risk as you would with other types of signs in terms of turning it into a public forum.
Okay. Separately, I guess, and this is getting long in the tooth at 10 p.m., and we could probably figure this out with the city manager's authority to act, but if the city of Portsmouth were to put some celebratory signs outside of Portsmouth 400 LLC, would we be allowed to advertise our own announcement of the 400th event using and expending our own funds? Separate from the LLC, different.
The Inc. It's actually an incorporation.
Incorporated.
That for the city to place signs on its own property, I would think yes, you could do that. The same as we authorize certain government speech in our public forums, if you're going to put that out there as authorized by the city.
Okay. All right.
That's an opinion at 10 o'clock at night.
I think that given that this decision will be made by the city manager in consulting with the legal department, we can safely vote on this ordinance to provide the authority to act on this request.
Mm-hmm.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next up, we are on to, yes, we got through the consent agenda. Oh, no, and now we got through the presentations of written communication. All right. Well, to me, appointments to be considered, appointment of Linnea Grimm to the Arts and Nonprofits Committee, President and CEO of Strawberry Bank Museum. She takes up the spot that is held by Strawberry Bank with Larry Yurden's retirement. Reappointment of Jessica Blasco to the Conservation Commission, appointment of Abner Fitzpatrick to the Conservation Commission, reappointment of Abigail Jindal, Barbara McMillan, Allison Tanner, Lynn Vaccaro, all to the Conservation Commission. Appointment of Linnea Grimm to the Prescott Park Master Plan Implementation Blue Ribbon Committee. This is an additional seat to the Prescott Park Master Plan Implementation Blue Ribbon Committee, and acknowledges the impact that anything we do at Prescott Park will no doubt impact Strawberry Bank. Would like a representative on there. Again, we will vote on that at the next meeting, and if anybody has a concern, please share that with me either before or at the meeting itself. And then we have appointments to be voted on. The reappointment of David Adams to the HDC. I'd wait a motion to approve his appointment.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The reappointment of Peter Britz, that's our Planning and Sustainability Director, to the Rockingham Planning Commission. I'd wait a motion to approve his reappointment.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And it is with regret that I accept the resignation of Ernie Carrier from the Planning Board. I'd wait a motion to accept the resignation of Ernie Carrier from the Planning Board.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Counselor Tabor.
Thank you, Mayor. The launch of Portsmouth Community Power is going extremely smoothly. Eversource has been very cooperative. They've created a billing code. They've tested the billing. And as of today, 11,827 residents and businesses are taking Portsmouth Community Power and saving money. Nearly everyone is on the Granite Basic rate of 15.8 cents, which compares to the 20 cents for Eversource default. So that's a 20% savings. It averages about $37 a month. We've got some commercial users, and they're going to be enrolled at 10% savings. I could tell lots more, but the hour's late. The other key statistics that we're watching are how many people are opting up to the greener options. And that's disappointing. We'd done a citywide survey that indicated, 40-50% were interested in doing that, even if it costs more. But to date, we've only got 107 people enrolled in that. So when the Energy Advisory Committee meets Thursday, we're going to talk about how do we nudge people to take advantage of these savings. Right now, it's cheaper to buy 100% renewable power by $9 a month than what you pay Eversource for dirty power. So that may not always be true as rates change, but right now it's true, and we want this to not just be short-term savings, but I like to call it power with a purpose, that we can actually induce people to buy more green energy. So that's work ahead for us. And just finally, the rates will change. June and July, we're going to save Portsmouth residents and businesses $810,000 overall. And the total, including putting away reserves, is $2 million in those 2 months of benefit to our residents. But then the rates reset for August 1 through January 31st, and all the utilities go out to bid. So we'll get a clear idea late this month of what our rates will be. We're confident we'll continue to be lower. we may be, closing the gap a little on the renewable options. We'll just have to see what the markets give us. But it's going quite smoothly after 18 months of analysis and planning and community education and support of this council. So it's off to a good start.
Thank you, Councilor Tabor. It does take 7 times for something to be shared, to be remembered, so hopefully this will be back on the agenda next month as well.
It's a marketing challenge.
It is. There's a lot of busy things going on, but appreciate nonetheless all of the work that has gone into this and giving us Portsmouth taxpayers or ratepayers a discount and a savings and an ability to make a better choice. Councilor Moreau.
Thank you, Mayor. If it's acceptable, I was going to also ask Assistant Mayor Kelly to help me give a report back, and if Councilor Blaylock has any input as well. We had a very long meeting last Friday, it was close to 3 hours. We had a lot to go over. You specifically want to report back on the city-owned properties, I believe is what the request was, and to prioritize them. There was much discussion around that. We had both Craig Welsh and Adam Rudig, who heads up the development side of Portsmouth Housing Authority, and they not only took us through, looking at and, thinking about those 4 properties, but also many of their properties that they own, and, where development, we did aerial views on a screen, had a look at, what the property looked like, what the neighborhood around the properties looked like, so you could have a really sort of bird's eye view of trying to understand where these properties are and what's in connection with them. So there was discussion around inviting other developers to come and do requests for proposals for the property. There was discussion around, really, I in my opinion, I thought most people felt like because the Sherburne School property was the largest property, it's also the driest property. It probably, and it abuts a highway for a huge portion of the property. It is the most sensible, straightforward build. The Falkland Way, I thought, was also quite possible, but in order to build on that property, you also have to include Portsmouth Housing Authority property. There's not quite enough land there to build just on the piece that Portsmouth owns, that the city owns. You'd have to also do the PHA property in addition to it. Personally, because someone brought it up earlier, I have no problem with us having affordable housing at the Greenleaf Ave property. I look at it every day, I park near it every day, and would love to see something better than a bunch of trees and weeds. So I think that there are not only restrictions on the deed, but the property is also currently leased out. The building is leased to a nonprofit, and so it does make that property sort of a longer-term conversation versus a shorter-term conversation. And the lower lot of City Hall, I was trying to remember what the other one was. There was discussion about that, and that's perfectly, Portsmouth Housing Authority would make any one of those properties work. They were willing to do all 4 of them if we asked them to. So there is definitely the opinion of what is just the easiest moving forward, the longer term projects. And then there was also the discussion, we do have, I believe, the police station's also looking at city-owned properties, so we need to keep that an open mind, that we're not the only one looking at properties right now. So maybe we need to have a discussion with them and see what they're looking at before we finalize anything as well. So that was where the conversation centered around, and we thought we'd bring it back to this full council to be able to have the discussion about next steps. I mean, really at this point, if we're going to truly do any surveying or engineering, it would take money in which to be able to do that. And, land use doesn't really have the authority to spend the money to do that sort of thing. So, and I would invite the other councilors if they have anything further to add to that conversation.
Thanks. I'll touch on a few things that were said this evening. One of them that has been addressed is Mr. Welch's being on the committee. And I think it's important to remind people that when this committee was started, we weren't just there to tackle the affordable housing crisis. We are here to tackle a plethora of things, including zoning, ordinances, affordability. And when we first started in the committee, we had broken up into two separate groups. And so Mr. Welch's expertise in affordable and nonprofit development, I think that's a very important fact to talk on when people are discussing why we're in conversation with Portsmouth Housing Authority. Although they are a private developer, they are a nonprofit developer that the city has continuously partnered with, and there's value in that. I also think it's important as people kind of have phrased the conversation of giving something away as if we would not be getting anything in return. And in return, we'd be getting permanently affordable housing. The same that we've done at the Lafayette School, the same as the city has worked in partnership here at Connors Cottage. So it's not a new model, and I think that's a very important point in the conversation and about this when we talk about why preliminary there has been discussions with a partnership with PHA. As Councilor Morose talked about, there were conversations of do we put now that we kind of have narrowed this city-owned land down, what is the best next step? Is the best next step that the city spends money to look at kind of the redevelopment of these properties, or is the best next step to put it out there to the market, including if they would so want to, PHA and other profit or ideally nonprofit developers to look at that. So really, again, like Councilor said, we're really looking for guidance from, we're at a point where funds are going to have to be expended if we want to just, in general, survey these properties more for development. I personally do agree with Councilor Moreau when we talk about, I think the consensus is that it does seem like a good place if we're comparing it to other locations to put affordable housing. The question is, what is the best process? And who do we engage? I think it's very important, and this is in no way disrespect to the Paranaway neighborhood. I live in a very insular neighborhood myself in Maple Haven. I understand the concerns. But I think it's very important, and it's been said in some degrees in land use and in council to a negative, that, we ran, or myself, I can speak for myself, on affordability and affordable housing, and that's absolutely correct, and I stand by that, and I will do my darndest to fight and to build more affordable housing. I don't find that as a negative. I think some members of the community have come up and spoken as if it's a negative or a political spin. I think that for me, building affordable housing is a priority. It will always be a priority to me. So I find that, as some people may think that we are pushing this project, I'm pushing for us as a community to build more affordable housing because we are in a housing crisis nationally. I also would like to address, some people in land use have brought up that it's not just our responsibility. I view it as my responsibility. We cannot control what other communities do and what other communities build. Dover has been pretty aggressive in the work that they've been doing in the last few years to do more affordable housing. But again, I think that, the conversation comes up sometimes that it's not just our problem. But I look at it as that we have to look at a solution for us. Again, we cannot control what other people do. I cannot control what a private developer for profit does on their property, but we can control what a developer does on property that we land use to them. So again, I just want to make sure that this narrative that we're just giving something away with nothing in return. Also, as we discussed, Councilor Blaylock mentioned in land use, I'm committed, and I know I feel I can speak for this council, that we are committed that if we have a removal of a girls' softball field, we are committed to building another girls' softball field. We will not lose. I played softball. We will not lose a recreational field for these young girls. There was also discussion of making sure it is a priority no matter what happens in that building and in that space, that building is there. So really, again, I think that's a conversation that we have to have as a council and as a city of if that building is not, rehabbed for housing through a partnership with a nonprofit developer, of the general cost of maintenance and what could potentially happen in that building. But for me, and I believe PHA, Adam spoke on that, they would be committed to keeping that building. It's a fixture in that community, and so I think that's an important talking point. But I think we have to decide as a council kind of what our next steps are, and also making sure, while it is very, very important to highlight and include Panaway Manor in these discussions and those residents, they are top tier important in here. It's also important to include other residents from other part of the community, because we hear a lot of people saying constantly when we do these surveys, and I think on Flash Vote, when we sent out, the words affordable housing constantly come up in the general conversations of the community.
Thank you, Assistant Mayor. Councilor Butler.
Thank you, and thank you, Councilor Moreau and Assistant Mayor Kelly, for that recap. We did have a long discussion. I'll also just touch on some other ideas that were brought up. The idea of redeveloping some of PHA's current housing or current land was brought up. PHA stressed to us that would cause those current tenants to be displaced. So we'd be actually doing the opposite of what we're trying to do. We're trying to build affordable housing. We would actually be kicking people out of their homes to do that, which will not support. But it was very informative to have PHA in the room to have that discussion. They're the biggest landlord in Portsmouth. I'll remind people that. They're the only ones that build affordable housing in Portsmouth over the last 75 years. And they are a nonprofit organization. But we are at the point where we still need to do traffic studies. We still need to figure out, potentially how many units. To get to those points, we need to spend some of taxpayer money. So that's the point we're at now. I think the Sherburne property, like Councilor said, it's the driest, it's the largest, it's the most buildable. It doesn't have any deed restrictions. We currently don't have anyone leasing any buildings on that property. We own it. Given those factors, it is the best path forward, I believe. Even though I know it's in my front yard, and I know some of my neighbors are not happy with me saying this, but I know if we're going to build affordable housing in Portsmouth, like a lot of members in this council have said they want to do, this is the best way forward. And I will say, it is hard for a city to build affordable housing. We can make policy decisions, but we're trying our best.
Thank you, Councilor Butler. Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor, and thank you to the three councilors that have done a tremendous amount of work on this. I guess it's probably not surprising that the Sherburne site rose to the top, because when we did the first analysis, it looked like a very good site. So it's not shocking to me that it made it to the top 4, and then being the largest site and the driest site, looks like it should be the one that's best to develop. We, as I see it, kind of have two paths. One, we could commit to going with PHA, which has an excellent reputation here in town. The Ruth Griffin Place project is tremendous. It was recently done. They're a well-known entity, but we could also, put it out to bid to different nonprofits, like Avesta Housing is one that comes to mind. It may be worth making some inquiries with them and some of the other potential relatively local nonprofits to see if there is interest. But I do think we want to move quickly. I think we want to engage the neighborhood a little bit with some meetings, and figure out what is the minimum. I mean, we heard a lot that 40 is kind of a magic number for number of units. Is that actually the case? Is it 40 and 40? Is it only 40? What's the threshold to make a project happen, and then start to get the ducks in a row to make this project actually happen? Speaking of Ruth Griffin Place, which is workforce housing, they had the community colleges of New Hampshire are doing an initiative for people living in workforce housing that actually came out of Ruth Griffin Place. It started in January. And what they're doing is they're getting families and individuals that live there pathway to community college so that they can get a better career for themselves going, so that they might be able to move out of that housing and free those spots up for people coming behind them. I was struck, one of the women who spoke there was Ryan Wolf, who I think anybody that has a kid that's gone through the school system in the last 10 years probably knows. She's been one of the real just wonderful people that works with Peak and Seacoast Community Schools. So I think, in the back of my head, and I keep beating this drum, the people that live in workforce housing are the people that make our community run and be what it is. And, we're down something like 1,500 units. We could use as many units as possible, and we could use them yesterday. So I think we probably are close to finalizing on this site. What I'd like to see us do is incorporate some people that are in close proximity and maybe do a little outreach to some other nonprofits. And if there's a strong interest, maybe investigate that. But if there's not, we've got a real winner with PHA, and maybe we should just go forward with them.
Councilor Bagley. Councilor Moreau.
I just want to add one more thing that I was thinking about. I did actually ask PHA how many units they thought if they were going to redevelop the school building itself, and they thought they could fit between 12 and 15 units in the building.
Thank you, Councilor Moreau. Below market rate housing is really difficult when you are in the greatest city in America. There's a lot of people wanting to build here. We are locked by a lot of water. The land cost is enormous, and the opportunity cost for developers to not take a full market rate apartment is pretty substantial. Encouraged by the zoning changes that are going to and through, hopefully, the planning board to make that from an and or an or to an and. Changing one word changes a lot when it comes to some of the overlay districts. But we have an opportunity to build affordable housing. And I think first, when it comes to the PHA, I hear them called a for-profit developer, and there's not a lot of things that I kind of say that's kind of out of left field, but they were created by Housing and Urban Development in the 40s to create public housing with municipalities. We control the board of the PHA through appointments and do so as a council. And they used to build a lot more, and I think that somebody had mentioned this evening that we're giving away property. We have a history of doing that. Did it at Connors Cottage, did it at the Lafayette School, did it at the Keefe House, the old high school. There's a theme there in that old schools, when they are not needed, they are turned in to housing. That this happens to be one of the driest locations and one of the biggest locations, I think, puts it up as something that we should strongly consider, and I'd look forward to a motion that would set us on the path of at least hearing what could happen there, and potentially from the PHA. And I've stated before, I do think that we need members of the community, but as the assistant mayor said, this is not just, we don't make any decision as a council that affects just one neighborhood. Bartlett Street intersection is a pretty good example of that. Most people, at least in the surrounding area, really happy with the slowing down of traffic. I don't know if the data supports that, but nobody's in my backyard has come up and said, I hate this, and I thought everybody was going to hate it. But a lot of people outside the neighborhood dislike it. And so we don't make decisions that don't affect all of Portsmouth up here, and I would hope that folks in the Sherburne neighborhood and the Panaway neighborhood understand that, and I think we can give them a voice as part of a committee to figure out what would be built there. But to delay indefinitely, there's not a person now that states, oh, the Ruth Griffin apartments were not a great idea. But there were a ton. Went all the way to court, cost $1 million, delayed it for a very long time. Folks took that and probably cost $1 million in the process, maybe more. But it cost money and delays. And when everybody was there, and I guess I'll just I'll share this story. I had the distinct honor and pleasure of going and meeting a lovely woman named Eleanor Browning, 104 years old. And man, if I look that good at 84 years old, I'll take that bet right now. She looked amazing. But as happy as she was, she was the happiest when one of the workers there's daughter had baked her a cake, and this cake was amazing. And I don't say that just because it was a 104-year-old birthday. And I know that the story is long at 10:30 at night. But afterwards, when I was leaving, the woman who worked at Eleanor's house stated that she wouldn't been able to stay here and live in Portsmouth if she did not, and work there if she did not live in the Ruth Griffin Apartments. So there's not just restaurant workers, they're the folks that look after us, that bring their daughters in, to bake cakes for those folks that live and are giving back into our community after giving so much. And so I guess one thing that I want to close with before hopefully there's a consensus on maybe hearing from PHA about this particular property at the next council meeting, and then we could make a decision whether or not to set up a committee around that Blue Ribbon Committee. Somebody said, well, you don't just give away property. Well, we have, but what struck me, maybe it's, maybe we could sell it and we could, we'd get the money one time. But what struck me is, stayed with me, was that we won't know what we need in 5 or 10 years. And I agree 100% that we will not know what we're going to need in 5 or 10 years, but I know what we need today, and that's below market rate housing. We need that more than anything. When we're talking about the character of the city, it's not the buildings that people complain about, it's the fact that there are less people, less economic diversity in our city than there was when I was born. And if we don't do anything about it, we're not going to have the opportunity to do so. So when it's talking about what we know in 5 or 10 years, I would agree wholeheartedly. I don't know that answer. I just know what we need to do right now, and that is where we have the opportunity to make it more affordable to build. We need to take that opportunity. So this is not by any stretch of the imagination a done deal. There's going to be a lot, and I'm committed to having a committee that would be steering this along with members of the community, because this is a community decision. But I think we've heard a lot, and I respect the time and effort that has gone into this endeavor, and I look forward to the next steps. Should have passed the gavel, sorry. Councilor Denton.
Your Honor, I motion to suspend the rules to go past 10:30.
Second.
Oh, yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
There.
Kelly can't vote, but. Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. I guess I'll take a stab at a motion. I move that we invite PHA to present at the next council meeting some options for the Sherburne School site, taking into account some of the feedback we received at the work session that we had on site there.
Is there a second?
Second.
Or, Councilor Denton?
I'd like to amend that with an addition that city staff present cost estimates on anything from traffic flow surveys to land siting. I'm not a...
What are we trying to get to?
Yeah. For staff to present estimates of what it might cost the city, because there's been talk of it's time the city would have to spend money to move forward.
Oh, you mean doing actual engineering work on the property to see what
so
it's
estimates
developable
for that.
for?
If I may, Your Honor, we could get an order of magnitude. I can't guarantee we'll have it by the next council meeting, but it's something we can get to work on.
Is that, okay, so that's an amendment to that. So is there a second to that? And the motion was to have cost estimates relating to the
engineering
of the site.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, now the original motion is to have PHA present on the Sherburne location and options for that. Councilor Denton?
Sure. I have mentioned it before that my preference would indeed be the parking lot outside this building. However, I want to see all these properties ideally developed, and the will of the council seems to be leaning in this direction, and we need affordable housing. One thing which I've said often over the past decade now is I've been the only renter to sit up here who doesn't also own property. It just dawned on me recently that for the majority of that time, the majority of my income went towards rent. So although I wouldn't qualify to live in this building, I love where I live now, but this could make a huge difference in any number of people's lives. And the topic of Ruth Griffin Place came up. The biggest thing that this council, just the past several councils have done, is simply waiving the taxes for the Ruth Griffin Place. And I was glad to vote on that, but just taking a bigger step towards any brick and mortar project towards affordable housing is one which I think we need to explore.
Councilor Denton? Councilor Bagley? Or Councilor
Yeah.
Cook? This is your motion, so Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I agree with Councilor Dutton that I would like to see a report back from the Portsmouth Housing Authority on the Sherburne School site. But I think it's important to also consider the other sites as well, even if we can't have an immediate development. I would really welcome development in the lower parking lot here, this is my neighborhood. I think that would be fantastic addition to the neighborhood, more affordable housing. So if we can have them report back on the Sherburne site, because we know that they had already worked on that at this point, but also it would be nice to get some reflections on the other sites and what their thinking is around those other sites as well.
Assistant Mayor?
To that point, one of the things that we talked about too in land use was that they don't have to be the only person doing projects in our city. If they are, if we are partnering with them on this and we find other lots through engineering that work, there's no harm in the more we can build.
So is there, I don't know if this needs to be, should be, I guess, do we want to report back on the Sherburne plus the other 3 locations?
Your Honor.
Councilor Blaylock, just on land use and then Councilor Bagley.
I'll just state that we did talk about, I know Councilor Tabor brought it up at the last meeting, and I confirmed with Adam Rudig and Craig Welch that they are only allowed to apply for tax credits for one property. It takes too much work, it's too much cumbersome, so they can't tackle on 4 projects or even 2 projects at once. That's the way they've always done things. But they did stress that they would have to focus on one property. But as I was quoted in the paper, I think all 4 of these should be looked at eventually. I just think that they were like, we can only tackle one at a time.
Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, and just to that point, a question for the city manager. I did say in the motion at the next council meeting, would it be better to amend that to say no? Okay.
I think we're good on that. Okay. Any other discussion? Assistant Mayor?
No.
Just a discussion in your head. Okay. Councilor Tabor.
Where in this, is there a step that we engage the neighborhood again? I think that's important. We've done the due diligence. I feel confident that when you say this is the biggest piece, the driest piece, the most accessible piece, but how do we engage with the neighborhood on that? We had talked about maybe a blue ribbon committee involving the neighborhood as a step. I'm concerned that if we just have a proposal come to us from the PHA and we vote on that, we've moved too fast.
So just what my expectation of a presentation would not be a fully baked out design as we had before. I think that's the mistake that we learned, is that we we've presented some things that were premature, and we're very, very aware of the feelings that those design concepts were premature. What I would hope is that we would have a presentation on why the PHA agrees with this site and potentially discuss the other sites as a portion of that as future steps. And then from there, have a, if we're doing this at New Franklin, I know the folks to ask to think of the things that we wouldn't think as the council. And I'd also know that we would need other input from around the city to help identify the true need and why this is a good thing to do, and get to a point where we could then present to the larger neighborhood. But I think as a next step from a community involvement standpoint, we do need some sort of Blue Ribbon Committee that would help craft what would be presented to that, because we tried it on our own and it didn't work. So hopefully getting some feedback from a smaller group that could then join and present to a larger group about a potential site there, or we run into the roadblock that we did again. But I'm hopeful and confident that if we get folks in there, identify the problem, identify pathways to solutions, we can get something that's presentable to a larger community.
Might I suggest that we actually request from our community housing navigator a plan that maybe he could help us think through a proper engagement of the community regarding this?
Howard.
Sure. I think that we should, as a part of, I think that, potentially it's just I don't know if it's identified. I think we need to hear from this because, it's again, we need to, I think, hear from the fact, from the PHA, why this. We've identified from land use for, I think we've been, as a council, roughly, even if there's the lower City Hall lot is a close second, that we should be moving forward with this. We want to hear from the PHA on that in not a presentation, but reasons why this could work, and then reach out to the community with the housing navigator. But I would save that motion probably, or that for the next time, because I would hope that between now and then we could potentially talk about the Blue Ribbon Committee and anybody that would want to serve on that. Councilor Lombardi.
Would it be possible to have a presentation that looked at Sherburne but also looked at the lower lot at the same time, and to give us the opportunity to see the pluses and minuses of both or either of those lots? Because I think they're both highly usable lots, if I'm not mistaken.
They are, and I think that if we heard from the PHA on the reasons why this might be, why the Sherburne might be, it is bigger, but surface parking lots, do they need to exist in the way that they do? No. The difference between the lower lot right now and the Sherburne is that we plan to leave the Sherburne, and the idea of mothballing a building for a portion of time, I think, makes the Sherburne site, at least from a deciding what to do with it, whether or not it's move it or if we're just going to have it collect and maintain it without a purpose come next year when we've moved over to Robert Lister Academy, or moved Robert Lister Academy to the community campus, it starts to put a timeline on making a decision around the Sherburne. And that's, I think, part of all of this, and all things being equal, the fact that this is a building that will no longer be serving a civic portion. The softball field certainly will be serving a civic portion, but Councilor Blaylock had the foresight to move forward in the CIP in addition to the community campus, or the turf fields at the community campus. So we're filling that need as well, in anticipation of being able to move forward with this. But I think having a discussion on other aspects, ultimately, it's our decision to make. It's not PHA's decision to make, but I'd like to hear from them in a public setting with people being able to share their opinions, as I'm confident they will, on that decision. I imagine we'll have a report, and the report will be a part of the packet, and people will be able to come with questions on the packet and the report, and hopefully we'll get a better outcome based on that. So the motion as it stands right now, as amended, it was to include figures from the city manager in terms of costs, soft costs that the city might borne on this. And the motion was to have a report on the Sherburne site from the PHA at the next council meeting. Not a selection of the site to move forward. There's a fair amount that would have to happen before that, and as stated here, and for the folks at home, it is our commitment to have a public process that involves from soup to nuts any design when regard to the amount, the density, et cetera, on the Sherburne site before we'd share that more broadly with the rest of the Panaway and Sherburne neighborhoods.
Sounds good.
All right. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Next up is the approval of grants and donations. Acceptance of donation to the Senior Activity Center from Service Credit Union to support refreshments for our veteran coffee afternoons in the amount of $1,200. I'd await a motion to approve and accept the donation as presented.
So moved.
Second.
I thought Josh was going to beat you on that one.
I know.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next, the acceptance of donation to the skateboard park from Lisa Morse in the amount of $1,000. Thank you, Lisa. Move to approve and accept the donation as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? There's no city manager informational items. Under miscellaneous, if you are, happen to be building a project, on downtown, be aware, this weekend is Market Square Day. So it's going to be, hopefully, knock on wood, great weather. You will see my triumphant return to the race course. It's only been 20 years since I went running, so hopefully, don't blow up my knee. And then on Sunday is the Mayor's Ride. So exciting. If you get me in the Piscataqua, we could have a triathlon of it.
You should also congratulate all the graduates from Portsmouth High School this
Oh,
Friday.
yes. And
Graduation.
And graduation is this Friday. And the weather, we're going to hold out hope that we'll get some of that parade luck. And I just want to thank the 400th, again, all of the volunteers that worked tirelessly on the parade. I got to say, it was the perfect weather to see the true believers out there. Not rain, a little cold, little chilly, but the amount of folks that put so much effort in to this parade. We talk a lot about a lot of heavy things in Portsmouth. We talk a lot about a lot of hard things, decisions, balances, but the effort that went into the parade was second to none. It was pretty amazing. Councilor Moreau?
I'd just like to publicly thank Trevor Bartlett,
Yep, Trevor.
Bryn Sullivan, Monty Mohanan, and Russ Grazier, because they were the dream team that made that all happen.
They really did. And, Portsmouth's a great city because we're full of great people, and those are four that definitely come to mind. So thank you, guys. Councilor Blaylock.
And PHS girls lacrosse team is playing in the state championship tomorrow night at 7 o'clock at Exeter High School. So
Excellent.
this for Division I championship.
We'll get a bus. I'd wait a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Good night, Portsmouth.